If Officer Ryan Mercer had arrived 10 minutes later, the house of crayons and lullabies would have closed for the day, and the secret buried under its nap room rug would have stayed silent. On that soft-lit Tuesday morning, everything looked perfect. Painted bumblebees, the scent of apple juice, toddlers singing off-key. But the instant Ryan's retired K-9 partner, Coda, crossed the threshold, the illusion cracked. The old German shepherd slowed by arthritic hips, but still razor-sharp froze, nose slanted toward an ordinary foam mat. One low growl vibrated through the room, chasing the cheer from the director's face. Moments later, Coda began to scratch. Once, twice, then with desperate purpose, as if the vinyl itself were begging to confess. When Ryan peeled back the mat, he found a seam in the floor that should never have existed and a rust-colored smear that set every instinct screaming. In that breath, the bright daycare transformed into a crime scene, and an aging war dog became the single thread pulling a monstrous tapestry into daylight. Stay until the last frame, because the deeper Coda digs, the more you'll question every safe place you've ever known. Willow Creek had the kind of silence you didn't question. It wasn't Emptino. The town was full of sound. Children laughed down cracked sidewalks. Wind chimes tinkled from porches where grandmothers rocked in time with memory. Lawnmowers hummed on Saturdays like a ritual. But it was the silence beneath it, all the silence of assumption, of comfort, that made it dangerous. No one locked their doors before 10 p.m. No one checked the fine print in daycare forms. And no one thought bad things could grow in a place with soft green hills and lemonade stands on every corner. Sunflower Nest Daycare sat tucked behind a grove of young maple trees, its picket fence newly painted, its sign curved with whimsical sunflowers and cartoon bees. To the casual eye, it was a picture of innocence. A place where finger painting met nap time, and storybooks closed on happy endings. That image was curated every detail from the apple-scented cleaner to the chalkboard menu boasting organic snack of the day. Parents never lingered. They trusted the brightness. They trusted the smiles. They trusted the quiet. And behind that trust, something waited. Ryan Mercer had seen the world unravel in worse places. 15 years in the Marine Corps chaff of that deployed. He'd watched entire cities collapse in smoke, stood in corridors where children wept behind broken walls. He came home with scars beneath the skin, with nightmares that didn't come every night but often enough. In Willow Creek, he'd found a second rhythm, a slower beat. A community that called him Sir at the grocery store and asked about his old K-9 like he was a war hero, not just a dog. But Coda was never just a dog. The German shepherd, now nearly 10, moved slower than before. His hips betrayed him on cold mornings, and gray curled around his black muzzle like frost on stone. But his eyes, those amber, alert eyes, hadn't dulled, not once. Ryan had learned to trust those eyes with his life. After retiring from active duty, Ryan had accepted a quiet position with the Willow Creek Sheriff's Department, Community Safety Liaison. They called it a made-up title for what was essentially public relations with a badge, school visits, senior center check-ins, parade details with Coda in a vest that read, "Retired, but still watching." And that was fine. He didn't want adrenaline anymore. He wanted routine. He wanted to believe in safe towns. But deep down, Ryan had never forgotten what his mentor once told him in Helmand Province. The places that look the safest are the ones you watch closest. Evil hides where no one thinks to look. He had no idea how true that would become. The days in Willow Creek were all beginning to blur for Ryan. He fed Coda at 6 a.m. sharp, walked him around the block before most porch lights blinked off, brewed bitter coffee in the same chipped mug, and sat in the same chair near the station's rear window, where he could see the edge of the playground at Sunflower Nest. It was routine, predictable. And that was the danger. Because routine breeds trust, and trust, if you're not careful, blinds you. That Saturday night, the call came in around 11:46 p.m. Ryan wasn't on duty. He was home, nursing a glass of something strong and flipping through photos on his phone. One was of Coda in full tactical gear beside him in Kandahar. Another showed them 2 years later at a school event where a 5-year-old girl had made Coda a paper medal. His phone buzzed on the table. It was a patrol officer, new kid, nervous. "Sir, there's a resident on Sycamore reporting." Weird sounds coming from the daycare. Weird sounds, Ryan had echoed. Yeah. Says she heard scratching, like claws or something scraping wood. She lives behind the place. Thought it might be raccoons. But she also said she heard crying. That last word stuck. Send me the address, Ryan said. You don't have to come, sir. It's probably nothing. Just some kids playing late, maybe. I'm already grabbing my vest, Ryan interrupted. Text me the gate code. Coda was already sitting by the front door, tail curled neatly, ears alert. They drove the 2 miles in silence. The town slept as they passed through it. Christmas lights still clung to a few porches, even though it was March. The street lamps buzzed softly, blinking every few seconds, like tired eyes refusing to close. Ryan parked across from the daycare. Everything looked normal. That's what unsettled him. The white lights above the entrance cast a warm glow over the cartoon flower mural. A few tricycles lay tipped over on the playground mulch, one wheel still faintly spinning from the breeze. But Coda's posture had shifted. His ears pressed slightly forward. His nose twitched at the air, and then softly he growled. Ryan's hand moved instinctively to his holster. There was no sign of forced entry, no broken window, no animal tracks, just a building that looked like it was still humming lullabies. Ryan let Coda lead. The moment they crossed the wooden gate, Coda's body tensed not in fear, but in readiness. Ryan didn't know it yet. Didn't know that within the next 48 hours, Willow Creek would be flipped inside out, that a retired military dog would unearth a secret buried beneath laughter and bright paint. That trust, the town's favorite currency, would be spent to the very last cent. Nohei didn't know yet, but Coda did. The sun rose soft and late over Willow Creek, that Sunday own of those pale Midwestern mornings that felt like a sigh. Light spilled through tree branches like golden silk, and the air still carried the memory of winter. It should have been peaceful. It looked peaceful. But Ryan Mercer had been around long enough to know that looks were often the first thing to lie. His truck rolled slowly to a stop in front of Sunflower Nest Daycare, tires crunching the frost-stitched gravel. In the passenger seat, Coda sat rigid, eyes fixed on the building like he was already cataloging every window, every movement, every scent in the air. The old shepherd hadn't barked. He hadn't whined. But his silence wasn't casual. It was trained, controlled. The kind that comes before a decision is made. Ryan sipped the last of his coffee and tossed the paper cup into the back. All right, boy. Let's prove this is nothing. Dispatch had kept their tone light when the call came in. Just a neighbor complaining about sounds in the night, scratching, or maybe pipes? Hard to say. The woman lived alone, mid-60s, and reportedly sensitive to noise. Ryan had heard that phrasing before. Usually meant a bored resident with too much time and not enough sleep. Still, something in her voice had caught him. She hadn't sounded confused. She'd sounded afraid. As they stepped out, the daycare looked exactly as it always did. Too perfect. A patch of wild daisies danced in the breeze beside the sign, which bore a cartoon sun with a face. The windows were trimmed with bright decals frogs, ladybugs, smiling clouds. There were tricycles stacked neatly by the fence, and the chalkboard out front read in green cursive, "Welcome back, little blossoms." Ryan scanned the roofline, the fence, the blind corners just habit. Nothing out of place. No broken locks. No signs of entry. Still, Coda pulled gently on the leash, forward. Intentional. The door buzzed open after one polite knock, and Director Delaney appeared pressed, blouse, tidy bun, clipboard in hand. Her smile was practiced and precise, the kind used to convincing anxious parents that everything was under control. "Officer Mercer," she said brightly, eyes flicking to Coda. "And our handsome guest. What brings you here on a Sunday?" "Routine welfare check," Ryan said calmly. "Neighbor reported hearing unusual noises last night." "Em?" Delaney's face flickered just for a second. "Oh? Well, that's strange. We've been closed all weekend. Just some staff inside doing spring prep." Ryan nodded. "Mind if we take a quick look around?" She hesitated, lips twitching toward a protest, then thought better of it. "Of course. Always happy to cooperate." Inside, the place smelled like floor polish, orange slices, and the faintest trace of vanilla-like innocence had been bottled and sprayed into the vents. Sunlight poured in through the playroom windows. There were cubbies, labeled in rainbow font, a mural of animals singing on the wall, and hand-drawn Mother's Day cards, strung on twine like a celebration of safety. Everything screamed normal. And yet, Coda pulled, agangently, but deliberately toward the back hallway. Ryan gave a short tug, just enough to steady him. "Let's take a walk," he said, more to Delaney than the dog. As they passed the front desk, a young assistant with bangs and nervous fingers looked up from wiping a juice stain. She flinched slightly when she saw Coda. Not fear of dogs, Ryan knew that look. It was something else, like she'd been startled out of pretending. "Everything okay, miss?" he asked. She smiled too quickly. "Yes, just didn't expect company." Coda didn't pause. His nose was in the air now, sampling every current. He made a sharp left near the art wall and pressed forward toward the nap room. Ryan felt the tension rise in his shoulders. This was no longer routine. The nap room was warm and softly lit. The walls were painted with moons and owls, and a white noise machine hummed from the corner. Rows of rolled-up nap mats sat in bins. Everything was pristine. But Coda didn't care about aesthetics. He moved past the bins, nose skimming the edges of the laminate flooring, tail stiff. Ryan watched his gait too focused. No hesitation. Delaney chuckled nervously behind him. "We've had dogs visit before. Therapy pups from the local shelter. They love our snack closet." Ryan didn't answer. Coda wasn't looking for food. He was looking for truth. The dog stopped near a multicolored foam mat in the far left corner. Head low, body tense. He gave a low, vibrating growler sound, so subtle most wouldn't have caught it, but Ryan did. He crouched beside him, eyes narrowing. The corner of the mat was curled slightly just enough to suggest it had been moved. Underneath, the faint glint of a seam wood, painted over, but uneven. Ryan reached out and pressed 2 fingers to it. The floor flexed, hollow. His heartbeat quickened. "Has this section always been like this?" he asked over his shoulder. Delaney was already walking toward them. "Oh, that?" she said lightly. "Probably just old glue. This building has quirks. You know how it is." Ryan didn't smile. "Mind if I pull the rug back?" Delaney hesitated again. "The children will be arriving from Sunday circle time soon. They don't do well with disruption." Ryan stood slowly. "This won't take long." He peeled the mat back with deliberate hands. That's when he saw it clearly. A square panel, roughly 2 feet across, poorly repainted to blend in. Nails flattened into the boards, not nailed through them. And near the edge, just where the foam had covered it, a smear. Dried. Brownish red. Ryan stared at it, unmoving. Coda let out a sharp, short bark. Not loud, but cutting. Final. The kind of bark that once warned Ryan of a live tripwire in Kandahar. He drew a slow breath. "I'm going to need backup," he said quietly, almost to himself. Coda wouldn't sit, even after Ryan gave the signal short whistle. Palm down, Coda stayed on his feet, tail rigid, nose flaring as if the walls themselves were whispering. The nap room, moments ago a tableau of pastel calm, now felt wrong. The shadows too still, the silence too deliberate. Something underneath the layers of quiet was humming, urgent. Coda began to pace tight circles at first, then direct movement. He brushed past the toy chest and the stack of folded blankets, zeroing in on the foam play rug in the far corner, the same corner where, minutes earlier, his body had tensed like a drawn bow. Ryan watched, his eyes narrowing. "Talk to me, buddy." The old shepherd lowered his head. His entire body moved in silence, yet radiated urgency. Each step across the vinyl floor echoed slightly more than the last. Then it came again, the scratching, barely audible, but unmistakable. A pause. Tap, tap. Then stillness. Ryan froze. So did Coda. No pipes made that rhythm. The daycare director, Delaney, had stepped back out to make a quick call, or so she said. Ryan hadn't asked her to stay. He was grateful she hadn't, because now, alone in this room of painted stars and lullaby machines, the mask of routine had finally cracked. Ryan knelt beside Coda. The shepherd was motionless, ears twitching like antennae, tuned to a frequency just beyond human reach. He stared at the rug-knot random movement. A stare with purpose. Ryan ran his hand along the edges of the rug. One side was ever so slightly lifted as if someone had pulled it back and hastily replaced it. A breath caught in his throat. He peeled the rug back. Beneath the bright foam padding, the linoleum floor changed color. The typical off-white gloss gave way to a faint discoloration like dust, but stickier, more intentional. Then he saw the seam again. A faint rectangle in the floor, 2 feet by 3. Imperfectly aligned wood grain, and an edge where the adhesive had bubbled. Ryan tapped it lightly. "Hollow," Coda whined. Low and rising in his throat, not panic, not warning urgency. Ryan brushed aside more dust, and then he saw it. A smudge just at the corner, reddish brown, old, dried in streaks. He touched it with a gloved finger. Rust. Number. The texture was wrong. The pattern too chaotic, too broken, not like a metal stain. Blood. Long since dried. Ryan's stomach tightened. Memories flickered of field deployments, of splatter patterns on bunker walls, of the time Coda froze in front of a storage crate in Afghanistan and led them to a child barely breathing inside. This felt like that. He stood and backed away slightly. Coda took his place, placing both front paws carefully on the panel, his nose pressed flat to the seam. Then, thud, a small sound from beneath. Then another. Not movement, not echo. Ryan's eyes widened. Someone was down there. He moved quickly but calmly to the nearest shelf and pulled it aside, revealing a small toolkit kept for classroom repairs. Inside, a flathead screwdriver. It would have to do. Back at the hatch, he wedged it under the edge of the seam and pried. The panel creaked. The air that rose from beneath was thick, still, and wrong, like old cellars or abandoned attics. But underneath that, a trace of something else. Sweat, plastic, and faintly, unmistakably ammonia. He lifted the hatch all the way. It was a crawl space, 6 feet deep, narrow, lit only by slivers of borrowed daylight leaking from floor gaps. And in it, he saw asterisk, a worn blanket, half covered in dust. Asterisk, a stuffed rabbit missing an eye. Asterisk, crumpled food wrapper juice box, applesauce pouch, saltines. Asterisk, a plastic bucket half filled with old water. Asterisk, and near the back wall, scratch marks. Dozens, long, desperate. Small fingernails dragged through dirt and wood, again and again, until they lost force. Ryan's hands gripped the edges of the opening. His breath came slower now, sharper. He whispered, "Dear God." Coda barked, one time, loud, echoing in the tight room like an explosion of truth. Ryan grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Officer Mercer. Badge 317. I need immediate backup at Sunflower Nest Daycare. We have possible unlawful confinement. Repeat, possible child confinement. Proceed with caution." His voice remained steady, but inside him, the wind was changing. Years of calm training were being overtaken by something deeper. He leaned over the opening again, his voice lowered but urgent. "Is someone down there? This is the police. You're safe now." Silence, then barely a shuffle. He turned to Coda. The dog was staring intently at the back wall, ears perked. "There's more," Ryan muttered. Coda's tail flicked once. Then came another sound from beyond the crawl space. Not under the nap room, but through it, behind it. Like an echo filtered through vents. Ryan turned slowly, scanning the floor. And just before the scene ended, he noticed something odd. The back wall of the nap room had a vent panel, screwed in backward, and it was humming. The screwdriver groaned as Ryan pried deeper into the seam. His breath fogged faintly in the cool air rising from below. But his hands were steady movement. Precise, methodical, military. It was instinct now. Years of opening crates in war zones, breaching storage rooms in villages with no names. You learned to listen to wood, how it spoke under stress. You learned to notice when something didn't want to be found. And this trap door? It was hiding. The panel finally gave way with a reluctant creak. Underneath the foam rug and thin laminate lay an old trap door, its edges uneven. The paint faded to the color of old bone. The wood was mismatched, one panel newer than the rest, brushed over with a half-hearted coat of white, barely concealing the subtle rust-colored smudges near the latch. Ryan's eyes narrowed, This wasn't part of any building code. Behind him, soft footsteps. Delaney had returned. "Officer Mercer," she said, voice high and brittle. "I'm going to have to ask you to stop." Ryan didn't turn. "On what grounds?" "This is private property. We run a state-licensed facility here. I need to call legal before—" Coda growled. Not loud, not aggressive, just certain. The low vibration of truth no human could replicate. It didn't threaten it, declared. Ryan stood, slowly. He turned to face her. Delaney was wringing her hands, fingers twisting at the gold chain of her lanyard. Her smile had vanished. In its place, tight lines around the eyes, the kind of fear people wear when the mask no longer fits. He said evenly, "You told me the back half of this building was sealed off." "It is," she answered quickly. Ryan gestured to the uneven wood at their feet. "So what's this?" "Have no idea," she stammered. "This building is old. It used to be a clinic before we bought it. Probably storage doesn't have fresh nails and half-covered bloodstains." Her mouth opened. No words came. Coda moved again, pacing slowly along the perimeter of the trapdoor. His body was alert, ears trained on something only he could hear. Then he paused. Nose down. One paw reached forward and gently tapped the floorboard to the right of the latch. Ryan crouched again. There, just under the grime, was the faint outline of a hinge. Another access point. He looked up. "You said you bought this building 3 years ago?" Delaney nodded, eyes darting to the door. "And you've never inspected this part of the floor?" "It's a daycare," she said, trying to sound indignant. "We clean it every day. But no, officer, we don't tear up floors looking for imaginary basements." Ryan didn't answer, because at that moment, the floor creaked again from underneath. A movement. Subtle. Weight-shifting. Someone was down there. The other staff members began gathering at the door to the nap room, half curious, half anxious. Their chatter had died down. The air now was static, as if the building itself was holding its breath. One of the assistants, a young man named Victor, cleared his throat. "Hey, we've got parents arriving for pickup soon. Maybe this could wait?" Ryan looked at him, then down at the dog beside him. Coda hadn't moved, still fixed on the door, still vibrating with certainty. Ryan spoke into his radio. "Dispatch Officer Mercer again. Confirm backup en route and advise we may have an active confinement case. Tell them to bring thermal imaging if available." He stood, looked back at Delaney. Her expression had hardened, like a woman who'd rehearsed this moment for years and finally ran out of script. She took a step forward. "Please, you don't know what you're doing." Ryan cut her off. "That's where you're wrong." He gripped the latch, pulled. The trapdoor shrieked as it opened. Hinges rusted from time or intentional neglect. Beneath it lay a narrow staircase, wooden, dust-caked, and angled sharply downward. No light, no ventilation, just the faint smell of bleach mixed with mold and something older. Ryan clicked on his flashlight. The beam cut through the dark. The steps led down to a chamber, maybe 6 feet deep. He could already make out the outline of a sleeping bag, a plastic bucket, and the unmistakable marks on the walls as if tiny hands had clawed for freedom. The hairs on his arms rose. This wasn't neglect. This was a prison. Coda barked on seashort and sharp. A warning. And a signal. There was more. Somewhere behind that chamber, somewhere beyond what they could see from here, there was more to unearth. The backup cruiser arrived with the low hum of urgency. Tires whispered against the gravel outside, and within moments, 2 uniformed deputies entered, eyes scanning the room that had once been filled with cartoon posters and alphabet rugs. Now, it was silent. Ryan met them at the door, his voice even. "We're opening the trap." Deputy Sloan raised an eyebrow. "Basement?" Ryan shook his head. "No basement on the blueprints. Crawl space. Possibly dug out." One of the daycare assistants, Lacey, barely 20, her ponytail trembling, stood behind the bookshelf, clutching a clipboard to her chest like it might protect her from whatever was under the floor. Ryan moved first. He knelt, this time not with caution, but with resolve. With gloved hands, he lifted the hatch fully. The hinges wailed in protest. A gust of air rose from the void, thick, stale, and damp, as if the earth itself exhaled its secret. Everyone instinctively leaned back. The smell wasn't just mildew, it was lived in. The beams cut through the darkness, landing on concrete floor, poured unevenly and patched with dirt near the edges. At the bottom of a crude wooden ladder, a heap of sleeping bags, their fabric stained and matted. Plastic food wrappers littered the floor, juice boxes, string cheese, crusts from sandwiches long expired. A white bucket, half filled with sloshing liquid, sat in the corner. Next to it, Ryan's light froze. Scratches, dozens, hundreds, etched into the walls, into the base of the wooden ladder, some shallow, some deep, some spelling out letters. A child's name, unfinished. Lacey gasped. She hadn't meant to. It escaped like a balloon slipping from trembling fingers. Jesus, she whispered. That's where they kept them? Ryan turned slowly, his eyes locked on hers. She didn't flinch from his stare, but she did from the truth. Her clipboard slipped from her hands, papers scattered. Deputy Sloan helped her to a chair, but she sat numbly, as if her body was there but her mind had already collapsed into the space beneath the floorboards. Lacey swallowed, tears welling. I thought the scratching was rats. Sometimes late. I heard it. I told Delaney. She said the pipes were settling. Ryan's jaw clenched. He knew that tone. That breaking point when disbelief cracks and guilt rushes in like floodwater. She covered her mouth. I could have said more. I could have... No, Ryan cut her off gently. They taught you to trust them. You're not the one hiding trapdoors. Lacey nodded, but her shoulders still shook. The truth didn't undo silence. It only demanded to be carried. Deputy Sloan returned from the crawl space, shaking his head. It's bad down there, Mercer. No light. No air vents. Looks like someone tried to soundproof the floorboards from inside. There's old foam stapled between the joists. Any sign of life? Not in the crawl space. But he trailed off. Ryan caught the hesitation. But what? There's an opening. Back wall. Tunnel, maybe? Looks like someone dug out into the adjacent building. Coda barked once, then twice. He had moved to the far wall where the old heating ducts met plaster, nose pressed against a segment of wallboard that looked newer. The paint still had a slight sheen. It hadn't had time to age like the rest. Ryan's breath slowed. The crawl space was just the beginning. He looked down one more time into the hole. The marks on the walls, the wrappers, the smell. This wasn't an emergency shelter. This wasn't some makeshift storm protection. This was a cell. A prison built beneath a preschool. And someone had gone to great lengths to make sure it stayed hidden. But now? Now the earth was giving up its secrets. And Coda was already tracking the scent of whatever waited on the other side. The children had been moved into the fenced play area out back, where plastic slides and faded hopscotch lines tried to reclaim normalcy. But even the sun couldn't chase away the heaviness that now lingered over the daycare like a wet blanket. Ryan stepped outside to clear his head. Radio still clipped to his vest. His boots crunched across the gravel toward the sandbox, where a boy, no older than 4, sat alone, quietly dragging a stick through the dirt. The child looked up, big brown eyes, mismatched socks, a dinosaur Band-Aid on one elbow. Ryan knelt beside him, careful not to crowd. Hey, bud, what's your name? The boy tilted his head, hesitant. Logan? That's a good name. Ryan smiled gently. You okay out here? Logan nodded. It's better than nap room. It smells weird in there. Ryan's smile faded. Yeah, I heard that. Did it always smell weird? The boy paused, then leaned closer, whispering like it was a secret. That's where kids go when they don't listen. Ryan's breath caught. What do you mean, Logan? Logan looked down, drawing a shaky square in the sand. When they're loud or hit or cry, Miss Delaney takes them to the rug room. She says it's the quiet box. Ugh. His fingers clenched the stick tighter. Jesse didn't come back after he bit Molly. Ryan's jaw tightened. Do you know Jesse's last name? Number. Logan's voice was small. But he had Spider-Man shoes. Ryan gave a nod, rising slowly. Thanks, Logan. That helps a lot. Back inside, the hallway felt darker than it had just moments ago. Deputy Sloan was cataloging the contents found in the crawlspace. Lacey sat pale and quiet near the coffee machine. But Jenna, another assistant, older than Lacey, maybe in her 30s, was pacing by the cubby lockers, twisting a set of keys in her hand like she wanted to vanish inside them. Jenna, Ryan called. Can I speak to you a moment? She turned sharply, caught. In her eyes, guilt, fear, and something else. Regret. They stepped into the front office, door ajar. Ryan kept his voice low. Logan told me something. Said kids were taken beneath the rug when they misbehaved. Said he saw one disappear and not come back. Jenna didn't look surprised. She looked haunted. Two heard crying. She said at last, voice breaking. At first I thought it was the vents. You know how old buildings moan. But then one night I stayed late, and it was definitely a child. She rubbed her arms. I asked Delaney. She laughed, said the pipes were acting up and the plumbing needed love. Called me sensitive. Did you ever see her open the floor? No, Jenna whispered. But she kept that nap room locked after hours. Always said it needed extra sanitizing. She told me never to question the routines. Said some kids need firmer boundaries. She sank into the office chair, trembling. I should have said something. Ryan didn't let her spiral. You're saying something now. He stepped out of the room and unclipped his radio. Unit 321 requesting immediate response from CPS and forensic team, he said into the mic. Also needs structural and excavation team. Possible interbuilding tunnel. Suspected long-term child endangerment and illegal detainment under daycare premises. 10-4, the dispatcher answered, her voice suddenly sharper. Ida for child welfare is 15. Forensics en route. Do you need medical? Stand by, Ryan said, eyeing the sky. The clouds had started to roll in just enough to dim the morning. We may. There's more we haven't uncovered yet. He turned back toward the daycare. Coda was still posted near the back wall, tail stiff, ears forward. Not aggressive, but on guard, focused. That unwavering tension that meant one thing. Someone or something was still nearby. And whatever secrets had been buried beneath cheerful rugs and crayon-scented walls, they weren't done speaking yet. The nap room had become a crime scene. Polaroid cameras clicked softly. Evidence bags rustled. The rhythmic hum of the portable ventilation system couldn't mask the undercurrent of dread that coated every breath. The foam mats had been pulled back, each one bagged and labeled. The floorboards lay open, exposing the dark mouth of the crawlspace beneath a wound long hidden beneath pastel rugs and lullaby posters. Ryan stood to the side, arms crossed, eyes scanning the periphery. His partner, Coda, remained unusually tense. The old German shepherd had backed away from the trapdoor and now stood with his nose inches from the far walnut, the one with the toy shelf or windowed view of the yard, but a strange corner, covered in aging drywall and an odd patch of mildew. He hadn't moved in 3 minutes. Coda? Ryan called softly, stepping over the evidence tape. What do you smell? Coda didn't respond, at least not in the way most dogs would. He simply exhaled, low and sharp, then pressed his nose harder to the wall. His front paw scraped once, then again. That was no alert posture. That was an insistence. Marla Jacobs, the forensic tech from State, looked up from her camera. That your dog telling you something? Ryan gave a tight nod. That's him saying we're not done here. They approached the wall together. Marla pulled on a pair of fresh gloves and ran her fingers along the plaster. This section's damp, she murmured. Not connected to any active plumbing. Ryan touched the baseboard. It crumbled. Behind it, wooden slats, darkened with rot. Get me a flathead and a crowbar, he called to Sloan. Within seconds, the wall was being peeled back like wet bark. The first few planks groaned, resisted, then gave way to an awful smell-dank, musty, earthy. It wasn't sewage. It was time. Buried time. Behind the wall was nothing they could have expected. A hollow cavity, barely 3 feet high, receded into shadow. The dirt had been hand-dug, every inch scarred with frantic claw marks in smooth soil. Thin wooden boards reinforced parts of the ceiling. A small pile of broken crayon tips and a Hello Kitty sock lay discarded near the opening. Ryan crouched down. Coda waited beside him, tail rigid. Marla clicked on her tactical flashlight and ducked down beside them. Jesus, she muttered. This wasn't some crawl space. Someone made this. No wonder it smelled off, Ryan added. It's been hidden for years. Marla looked to him. We going in? Ryan gave one last glance at Coda. The dog didn't bark. He simply lowered himself into a slow crawl ready. That was all the answer he needed. The tunnel was cold and breathless. Ryan's shoulders scraped the sides. His knees sank slightly with every forward motion. The air tasted like wet stone and iron. Marla followed behind, her flashlight casting crawling shadows along the dirt. Every few feet, they passed strange, remnant-scrushed juice boxes, a snapped plastic tiara, a pacifier caked in dust. "How did nobody know this was here?" she whispered. "Because no one wanted to know," Ryan replied. "You build a place for children, paint the walls yellow and blue, and no one questions the cracks underneath." A silence. Marla spoke again, softer. "You think Delaney built this?" "Number." But she knew it was here. Ryan reached out and touched the tunnel ceiling. His fingers brushed a jagged nail sticking through one of the old planks. Someone reinforced this. Someone wanted it to stay hidden and accessible. Coda stopped ahead, letting out a short huff. Then they saw it. At the tunnel's end, the dirt gave way to dry concrete, cracked and stained. A rusted vent had been forced open, its edges jagged, as if pried apart by hand. The tunnel exited into a basement room, unlit but disturbingly intact. A few plastic chairs, a broken lamp, a bulletin board with torn fabric still nailed to it. They had crossed into another building. Ryan pulled himself up, boots planting firm on the concrete. He turned and reached for Marla. As she climbed through, her flashlight scanned the walls and stopped. A wave of stillness swept the room. There, mounted in crooked rows, were Polaroid photographs. Hundreds, some water-stained. Others fresh enough the white borders still held thumbprints. Faces of children stared back, some smiling, some blurred, some crying. On the opposite wall, a stack of cassette tapes, unlabeled, a tape recorder, and on the far side a medical waste bin. Marla pressed a hand to her mouth. "Oh my God." And Ryan stood frozen. His heart thundered. He looked to Coda, who had not moved from the vent's edge. The old dog stood guard not from fear, but as if to protect the children who had once been here. Their shadows still lingered in the walls, and now they would no longer be buried. They moved deeper. Ryan had seen dark rooms before, crawl spaces, torn-up basements, empty closets with secrets in their walls. But this chamber felt different, not because of what was there, but because of what had been taken from it. The flashlight's beam flickered across the entrance. Faint dust still swirled in the air from their crawl through the tunnel. The chamber was bare, except for scattered objects that shouldn't have existed in any place without light, warmth, or memory. A child's sneaker, Velcro strap broken, a sippy cup long since dried, the cartoon penguin on the side worn to a smudge, a torn page from a children's book curled in the corner like a wilted leaf illustrated with a smiling sun, and the words, "The stars are never lost, just hiding." Ryan stepped forward slowly, carefully. Each step echoed too long, as if the walls themselves were still listening. Marla stayed close behind, her breath audible in the quiet. She aimed her flashlight toward the far side of the chamber, where something glinted dully on the stone wall. "Ryan," she whispered. The light caught it fully now, not glint color. Crayon. Dozens of crude, childish drawings stretched across the damp concrete like a forgotten gallery. Some were water-stained, others smeared from years of condensation and dust. But the images, they were unmistakable. Children, stick figures crouched in boxes, square shapes drawn underground, connected by narrow tunnels. A blue figure standing alone, larger than the rest. Most of the children were depicted without mouths, just blank ovals or red X's, scrawled where lips should be. "No," Marla breathed. Ryan stared. One drawing near the floor showed a child with wide black eyes and a single word scratched above it in shaky block letters. "Shh," Coda whined. He'd wandered toward the left corner, where a rusted vent grate protruded from the base of the wall, about knee height. He didn't, Bark waited, ears perked, muscles taut. And then, without warning, a sharp, low bark cut the silence like a blade. Ryan spun toward him. "What is it, boy?" he said softly, kneeling beside the shepherd. Coda's nose touched the vent, and for a moment, everything was still. Then, from the other side, a cough, barely audible. Not deep or labored. Small, like a child trying not to be heard but failing against the dryness in their throat. Marla's hand flew to her chest. "Did you hear?" Ryan was already on his radio. "Dispatch. This is Officer Kendrick. We have a potential live presence behind a sealed vent in the second chamber. Unknown number of occupants request, EMTs, child welfare, and engineering support now. This is a red priority. He clicked off. Another cough. Then, a shuffle. A slight rasp of fabric against metal. Marla, he said, pointing. Find any latch or opening fast. She dropped to the ground, flashlight clattering as she felt along the vent edges. Ryan knelt beside her, pressing his ear to the cold steel. Inside, someone or something was moving. Hey, he said gently. It's okay. My name is Ryan. I'm with the police. You're not in trouble. Are you hurt? A pause. Silence. Then a whisper, cracked and paper thin. Is the blue man gone? Ryan's heart stopped. He looked to Marla, her eyes wide with dread. No one's here but us, he said. You're safe now. He reached out and touched Coda's back. The dog remained still, focused. His body like stone, but his presence a tether, a bridge. 10 minutes passed. Ryan and Marla managed to unscrew the vent cover using a multi-tool. As the metal clanged softly to the ground, a foul draft hit their faces, must and fear and old rot. Coda didn't flinch. Inside the passage, beyond reach of the flashlight's full beam, a shape moved. Small. Human. A pair of legs scooted forward, thin and pale, bruised at the shins. The child's face emerged, lace-smudged with grime, eyes enormous in the dark. Maybe 5 years old, wearing a shirt with faded dinosaurs and mismatched socks. No words came from him now, just his breath quick, shallow. Ryan offered his hand. It's okay, he said again. I promise, you don't ever have to go back in there. The boy didn't reach out, but after a moment, he let his knees slide across the concrete and into the light. Marla wrapped him in an emergency blanket. Coda moved beside them, tail low, ears back, and pressed his head gently to the boy's knee. The child's eyes softened for the first time. He whispered something not to Ryan, not to Marla, to Coda. Just one word. Found. The moment the girl came into view, time felt like it held its breath. The paramedics moved fast but gently, their voices low, murmurs over the static of radios and echo of boots in concrete. From the narrow crawl space behind the second vent, through a hole barely wide enough for a backpack, they slid her out like something fragile found beneath rubble. A child. 4 years old, dirt clinging to every inch of her skin, cheeks hollowed by days without food. Her hair, once likely golden, now matted and gray with dust. She didn't cry, didn't speak at first, just blinked against the light like it hurt, her pupils slow to shrink. And in her silence, there was something eerie, not shock, something older, as if part of her had learned to disappear long ago. Ryan crouched beside her, kneeling on one knee as the rescue team unfurled the thermal blanket. Her name is Lily, whispered a medic checking vitals. Lily Morgan, confirmed missing last Tuesday. Coda was beside him. At first, the girl didn't notice the dog. Her eyes darted around, searching for danger in corners where it no longer existed. But when Coda inched forward, slowly lowering his head like approaching a wounded animal, something shifted. Her lips parted, and for the first time since they found her, she smiled. Faint, crooked, worn. Doggy, she breathed, barely louder than air. Coda's nose touched her hand then, as if drawn by instinct. He licked the grime off her cheek. The room broke. One of the paramedics turned away, blinking hard. Marla pressed a hand to her mouth. Even Ryan, so used to chaos, to things buried underground, felt his throat catch. Because in that moment, surrounded by concrete and old pain, a little girl smiled through dust. Across the hallway, Delaney collapsed. Not physically, she didn't fall, but something in her gave way. Shoulders curled inward, jaw trembling. She leaned against the wall like it might hold her upright, but it didn't. I didn't know, she murmured to no one in particular. I didn't know. But Jenna did. The younger assistant sat on the bench outside the nap room, knees pulled to her chest, uniform stained with dirt and sweat. Her eyes stared at the opposite wall, but she wasn't really seeing it. Ryan approached her carefully. You said earlier, you thought the crying was plumbing? Jenna nodded, barely. Then her voice broke apart, like something splitting under too much weight. She told me. Delaney told me the girl just needed quiet, she whispered. That she was too sensitive. That if we just let her have space, she'd calm down eventually. She looked up at Ryan. shame bleeding into her voice. She said the girl had to be quiet to be safe. Another pause. She said, "You'll scare the other children if you make this a thing." Outside, sirens still wailed faintly in the distance. More backup. News vans, probably. The whole world about to descend on a daycare with bright walls and rotted secrets. Inside, Lily blinked up at the ceiling of the ambulance, her fingers wrapped around the emergency blanket, as if it were the first real thing she'd touched in days. And Coda? He sat at the base of the stretcher, tail thumping once, just once, in rhythm with the girl's shallow breath. Ryan turned toward the gathering crowd of responders and detectives and whispered under his breath, not to anyone really, just to the silence left behind. She smiled. The hum of fluorescent lights echoed in the city records office, a dull, almost forgettable rhythm. The kind that numbs the brain after hours of scrolling through digital ghosts. Ryan stood over Elise Roby's shoulder as she clicked through the last of the archived property logs. The detective's posture was sharp, still in full gear, but her eyes were growing bloodshot. Daylight had long since turned to that coppery dusk that made even the cleanest rooms look like crime scenes. Coda lay beneath the table, silent and watching. Always watching. "You're not going to like this," Elise muttered. She tapped the enter key one last time. The screen blinked. Then it populated with names stew, many names for one location. Evergreen Horizons LLC, Golden Harvest Development, Hopestone Initiatives, Bright Nest Child Solutions. 4 different ownership names in the last 6 years. All registered to the same square footage, 1,124 Beechwood Avenue. The same beige daycare with apple juice walls and cartoon murals masking a trap door. Ryan frowned. "Shell companies?" "Worse," Elise replied. "Shells within shells." She highlighted the registry changes. Each time, the business was sold under distress. Once due to financial strain. Once to restructure educational compliance. Each transfer was made through layers of holding accounts, most offshore. Then she clicked the Notes tab. Ryan's stomach turned. April 2021. Evergreen Horizons, CPS incident. Child found in facility after hours. No charges filed. June 2019. Golden Harvest. Anonymous call about locked closet. Investigation closed. Record sealed. October 2017. Bright Nest. Missing child report, later retracted. Mother moved states. He didn't speak for a moment, just stared. The words felt heavier than they should have. "How did nobody connect this?" he asked quietly. Elise leaned back, arms folded. Her voice was quieter, now closer to that of someone exhausted from screaming in silence. "They didn't want to. You spread this thin enough. No one knows who to hold." Ryan's hands curled slightly on the table edge. "They've been doing this for years," she nodded. "And hiding in plain sight. Change the name, repaint the walls, rehire low-level staff who don't know better. By the time a kid vanishes, the paperwork's already been passed." Ryan clicked through the file marked Golden Harvest again. Something gnawed at him. "Do you see this?" he pointed. "This EIN number, it's 1 digit off from the new registry." Elise narrowed her eyes. "You're saying they didn't even bother masking the employer ID's number? They just shifted it, enough for a casual glance to miss it." The screen turned sterile and blank again as she closed the file, her reflection flickering in the monitor like a ghost with a badge. Coda lifted his head, ears twitching. Ryan stared out the glass wall of the records office. Beyond the parking lot, the shadows were long and blurred, stretching over sidewalks like they were reaching for something long buried. "Who runs the top layer?" he asked, already suspecting the answer wouldn't be on paper. Elise pulled out her phone and opened a PDF from an earlier forensics dump. The payment routing for utilities traces to an account in Delaware, registered to something called Sunvale Enrichment Trust. Sounds friendly. Too friendly. Delaware's banking privacy laws are tight. No public UBO. Ryan exhaled sharply. "Which means we're dealing with someone who knew how to stay hidden. Or someone who's done this before," Elise added. Silence stretched between them, heavy and brittle. Ryan's mind was already racing, connecting dots that shouldn't have been dots in the first place. A girl found underground. Drawings of children with mouths crossed out. Corporate veils. Forgotten cries. Labeled as plumbing. "We need a forensic accountant," he muttered. Elise nodded. and a warrant for every building ever owned by any of these entities. If they did it here, they did it elsewhere. Outside, the wind pushed dust against the windows like a whisper trying to get in. Ryan looked down at Coda, who hadn't moved but was alert, muscles tensed. "Yeah, buddy," he murmured. "I feel it too, because there was something underneath all this. Not just greed, not just negligence. Design. Someone had built this house of cards deliberately, child by child, silence by silence." And Ryan knew with a clarity that hurt that Lily's smile through dust wasn't the only one lost in the dark. It was just the one they finally found. The bell above the old church door chimed once too sweet a sound for a place that smelled like dust and forgotten sermons. Ryan stood just outside the entrance to what used to be Dr. Langley's Family Dental, then became Grace Beacon Church in 2018, according to tax records. A single wooden cross now hung over the door, nailed into plaster that was beginning to flake. The name on the mailbox read, M. Harlow. Inside, a faint gospel track played from a Bluetooth speaker perched on a side table. No congregation, no candles, just folding chairs, a water cooler, and walls painted the color of cauterized silence. He didn't go in on it yet. Instead, Ryan turned his eyes back to the playground next door. The same playground where Coda had gone still as a stone. That alertness, that controlled tension, head low. Hackles just barely raised not in fear, but recognition. He'd seen it before. Kandahar, 2012. The alley with the half-collapsed schoolhouse. The boys chained beneath the floorboards, gagged with their own socks. Back then, it was insurgents hiding prisoners. Now, a former dental clinic turned prayer room with blackout blinds and no Sunday traffic. Coincidence rarely wore a collar this tight. Pastor Matthew Harlow. Elise read aloud from her notepad, stepping up beside him. Ordained in 2016. No formal seminary. Moved here in 17 from Alabama. Before that, Mississippi. No criminal history. But she flipped to the next page. He was also on the board of Golden Harvest Development for exactly 3 months in 2019. Ryan's jaw tightened. The same shell company that ran the daycare. Same one. Across the lot, Coda sniffed the air, then took 2 steps toward the back of the church building. His nose brushed against the siding, then paused. One ear twitched back. Ryan didn't call him, just watched. After a long beat, Coda sat, the kind of sit that said, "It's here." Elise didn't speak right away, but he knew her well enough to feel her thoughts forming behind the quiet. "That the same signal he gave at Beechwood?" she asked finally. Ryan nodded. "Identical." "Oh, same way he reacted in Kandahar?" He hesitated just a second too long. "Yeah." Elise exhaled through her nose, slow and careful. She pulled out her phone and began composing an affidavit. "I'll have the judge sign a preliminary warrant by morning. If there's physical transfer between these buildings ducting, crawl spaces, even that tunnel, you'll need every inch covered." Ryan looked toward the building again. It was too quiet. No locked fence, no Sunday service sign. Just that cross and the feeling in his gut that something was being held under it. "We've been focused on the daycare," he muttered. "But what if it was just the feeder, not the nest?" Elise didn't respond. A wind kicked up, scattering leaves across the parking lot. One blew past Coda. He didn't flinch. Ryan looked back at Elise. "If this guy's who I think he is, he's not acting alone." Elise nodded, face tight. "We'll get the warrant. Later that night, back in his apartment, Ryan stared at a file that should have been a simple property record and felt bile rising. Pastor Matthew Harlow had been present at every ownership change of the Beechwood Daycare, either as a board member, advisor, or spiritual liaison for the incoming staff. Each time, he left just before the press caught wind of anonymous tips. Each time, the paper trail ended in a blank check to a new nonprofit. And now, he ran a church that operated mostly on Thursdays, claimed no donations, and paid its utilities in cash. But what disturbed Ryan most wasn't the file. It was Coda, his stillness, his certainty, his knowing. Because in Kandahar, the boys had been moved next door before the drone surveillance caught on, right beneath the field hospital. And this had the same stink, only this time it wasn't war. It was home, and someone had turned a house of worship into a doorway. The floorboards didn't creak, they sighed. Ryan's boot pressed slowly against the worn oak as he and Elise stepped into the main room of Grace Beacon Church. The search warrant had come through an hour ago. No resistance. No one home. No sign of Pastor Harlow. But Coda had sat by the rear wall for nearly 10 minutes before moving, as if waiting for a permission Ryan hadn't yet given. The church was a shell of its name-thin carpet, mismatched chairs, a podium with fake wood grain laminate peeling at the corners. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, one flickering like a faulty nerve. There were no hymnals, no Bibles, just a line of pressed wood bookshelves against the back wall, each filled with religious literature that looked untouched. Then Coda froze again. His gaze didn't go to the shelves but beneath them. Ryan knelt. He ran a hand across the laminate baseboard and found a hairline crack unnatural, just slightly off-center. The scent hit before the panel even moved. A chemical tang. Formaldehyde. "Elise," he said quietly. She was already beside him, gloves on. Together, they slid the shelving unit forward on hidden wheels. Dust fluttered. Behind it, a small door unpainted, no handle. Just a recessed groove. Ryan pushed. The door popped inward with a soft click, and the air changed. It was colder, heavier. Inside, the walls were unfinished, cinder block and insulation foam. A single hanging bulb cast a low amber glow. The room wasn't large, maybe 10 by 10 feet, but every inch of it watched them. Coda stayed at the threshold. He didn't growl. He didn't enter. He just whined softly, like something inside was wrong on a level no command could override. Ryan's eyes adjusted, and the world narrowed. On the table, in the center of the room, was a stack of photographs. Some were crumpled, others pristine. All were of children. Some smiling, others mid-cry. Some in hospital gowns, others with birthday hats. All unframed, all time-stamped. Elise's hand trembled as she reached for the top one. A girl with mismatched socks and a Dora the Explorer lunchbox. Beneath her was a sticky note. Failed. Returned 11/02. "Jesus," Elise whispered. Ryan stepped closer to the far wall. There, in a crate, were journals, leather-bound, organized by year. Names scribbled on the spines, some with numbers, some with just initials. Next to them, cassette tapes, hundreds, labeled in neat handwriting. Side A, Side B. Some with symbols instead of words. Others had names that rang bells Ryan didn't want to ring. And then there was the smell. Not just formaldehyde now. It was mold, old sweat, rubber gloves. And beneath all of it, something that clung to grief, the scent of time lost. Ryan opened one of the drawers under the table. Inside, a spiral-bound list with headshots printed in low res. Some had red slashes across them. Others had been circled. Each one had a column labeled asterisk compliance level, asterisk response to isolation, asterisk suggested transition protocol. Elise moved to the wall. There, pinned between cork tiles, were maps. Pins stretched across Iowa, Arkansas, Louisiana. Highway stops, rest areas. Abandoned buildings marked with dates. She took one photo from the wall and gasped. "I've seen this face," she murmured. Amber Alert, 2019. Shreveport. She vanished, walking to school. Ryan looked closer. The girl's smile was crooked, her eyes too wide for her age. He turned the photo over. Recovered. Failed. Speech response. Reassigned. He felt the bile rise again, uninvited. Coda let out a sharp yip. Elise turned to Ryan, her voice low, shaken. "These aren't just records." She paused, holding up one of the cassettes. "They're trophies." Ryan backed toward the door. "We need a second evidence team. Hazmat. Missing persons from all 3 states. Now." Elise nodded, but she didn't move. Her eyes stayed locked on one last image taped above the light switch. A candid photo, grainy. Lily Morgan, holding a juice box, sunlight on her face. And beside her, just out of frame, the shape of a man in a clerical collar, his hand resting on her shoulder. The date in the corner, 2 weeks before she vanished. Elise didn't cry, but her breath caught like something had cracked, hidden in plain sight. she whispered. Ryan didn't reply. Because the worst evil never wore horns. It wore a smile and prayed next door. The air shifted the moment they ducked beneath the foundation again. Ryan's flashlight beam cut through webs of dust and time, catching the edges of rusted pipe and rat trails etched into dirt. The crawl space was as quiet as a held breath. Above them, the daycare buzzed with activity investigators cataloging evidence, child welfare workers guiding stunned children into daylight. But down here, it was another world, a place that chose silence. Coda moved ahead with purpose now. No sniffing at every beam, no distractions. His steps were low, deliberate, nose to soil, ears pinned forward like radar, tuned to something ancient. Ryan followed closely, his body low to the earth, every inch of him coated in sweat and grit. His flashlight caught glimmers of old foil snack wrappers and a single plastic fork half buried in clay. A broken crayon lay next to Itrid, the tip worn flat. They passed the stained mattress, the bucket, the scratching marks etched into concrete like someone had tried to claw time backward. And then Coda stopped. Not froze. Stopped. His whole body straightened into that chillingly familiar posture. Rigid spine. Hind legs tucked tight. Ears locked forward. Nose pointed square at the wall in front of him. Ryan's breath slowed. There was nothing remarkable about the wall at first glance, just more cinder block and cement. But then the light hit the corner, and Ryan saw it. The cement along the bottom edge of the wall was a different color, slightly darker. The pattern of the mold along the edges didn't match the rest of the room. There was a faint crescent in the dust line, like the section had been resealed. He leaned closer. The concrete smelled fresher. There was no such thing as new down here. But this wall hadn't aged with the rest of the room. The texture was smoother, more deliberate. He pulled off his glove and touched it. Still cold, but not the same kind of cold as the rest of the crawl space. This wasn't residual from decades. This was months, maybe weeks old. Coda sat perfectly still, alert posture, silent. This wasn't his search stance. It was the final posture he'd been trained to assume when something was there, something a liver once was. Ryan felt his throat tighten. He brought his radio up to his mouth slowly. "Base, this is Cole. I need you to notify Roby. We found a suspicious secondary structure under the daycare crawl space. Possible concealed chamber. Request ground-penetrating radar and forensic excavation team." The reply came, crackled, but clear. "Copy that. Sending down Jacobs now with sonar scope. ETA, 4 minutes." Ryan crouched beside Coda. His fingers traced the faint outline of where the wall met the original structure. It was deliberate, just skilled enough to blend to the untrained eye, but not old enough to belong to the bones of this building. He pulled back, looked at Coda. "Good boy," he whispered. Coda blinked once. No wag, no movement, still, waiting. Ryan's mind raced. This wall, this one wall, was different, not just in age. It had no reason to exist. It didn't support anything. It wasn't tied to pipes or ductwork. It was hiding something. A noise above footsteps at the crawlspace hatch. Marla Jacobs descended, carrying the portable ground sonar unit like a metal ghost in the dim. "Where's the spot?" she asked. Ryan pointed. Jacobs crouched, calibrating the probe, then slowly swept it across the cement. Her screen flickered. She adjusted again, frowned, ran the pass a second time. Then she paused. "There's a cavity," she said. "How big?" Jacobs narrowed her eyes at the readings. "Maybe 4 feet wide, 6 deep, irregular on one end. Like a tunnel?" She didn't answer at first, just stared at the screen. "Like a niche," she finally said. "Or a place to put something, or someone." Ryan stood. Everything felt heavier now. The air, his boots, even the silence. He looked at the wall one more time, and then he turned to Jacobs. "Don't drill anything until Elise gets here." "You think there's a body?" she asked. Ryan's voice came quieter than expected. "I think this place was never meant to be found." Above them, the world carried on. Children's cries, clipboards, questions. But down here? Down here was a secret, with a heartbeat that had long stopped echoing. And Coda, still sitting, still alert, was the only one who'd heard it first. They worked in silence. The soft whine of a portable demolition drill echoed through the crawl space like a wasp trapped inside a skull. Every vibration of the bit against cement sounded too loud, too close, as if the wall itself didn't want to be opened. Forensic tech Marla Jacobs knelt low, sweat beading under her helmet, hands steady. Each pass of the drill removed a thin layer of the seal, deliberate, methodical, no cracking, no sudden breaches. They couldn't risk a collapse, couldn't risk destroying whatever was on the other side. Ryan crouched behind her, eyes fixed on the edges of the wall. Coda sat behind him, still in his silent alert posture, unblinking. The air grew heavier the deeper they went. 3 hours. That's how long it took. Not because the concrete was thick, but because it wasn't supposed to be disturbed. Whoever poured it had done just enough to fake permanence. No steel mesh, no structural anchors, just a thin skin of secrecy, smoothed over fear. Jacobs wiped her brow, then paused. "We're close," she murmured. Ryan leaned forward. The drill bit punched through. With a faint hiss, air escaped from the other side, cool, stale, and sharp, like the scent of mold left in plastic. Ryan's breath caught. The temperature dipped several degrees in seconds. Jacobs widened the hole, then set the drill down gently. She reached for a pry bar, slid it into the thin fracture, and pulled. The wall gave with a groan. Not a crash, not a crumble, a surrender. A low slab of concrete tipped backward and landed with a muffled thud, revealing the space beyond. Ryan angled his flashlight. What stared back at them wasn't a room. It was a tunnel. 3 feet high, just wide enough for a childer, someone crawling on their belly. The walls weren't concrete, they were soil, hastily reinforced with old plywood sheets. Some warped, some mold-blackened, others stained with something darker, something dried long ago. Jacobs whispered, "Jesus." The plywood had been braced with metal rod-soled fence stakes, curtain rods, anything that could hold weight for a few feet. But the deeper it stretched, the more precarious it looked. "This isn't a crawl space," Ryan muttered. "This is a passage." He turned to Coda. The dog stepped forward, once, twice, nose low to the dirt. Then he dropped to his belly and inched ahead, vanishing into the dark like a shadow melting into earth. Ryan followed. The tunnel was cold, not winter cold, earth cold. It was the kind of cold that didn't come from weather, but from places light forgot. His shoulders grazed both sides. Every breath stirred dust. His knees sank into the packed soil, catching splinters from the plywood every few feet. The farther they went, the quieter it became. No muffled voices above, no creak of joists. Only breath and heartbeat and dirt shifting behind him as Jacobs followed with the thermal scope and camera rig. After 10 feet, Ryan paused. The beam of his flashlight caught something shimmering faintly at the edge of the tunnel wall. He leaned in. Nails. Dozens of small, bent nails driven into the wood like tally marks. Some scratched over, some grouped in clusters of 7. He didn't know what it meant, but it wasn't accidental. A faint gust blew past him. The air was getting colder. Jacobs exhaled behind him. "You feel that?" Ryan nodded. Ventilation somewhere. They pressed forward. At 20 feet, the tunnel shifted. The plywood on one side stopped, giving way to packed earth. It smelled wetter now, almost metallic. Another few feet. Then Coda stopped. He didn't bark, just waited, nose low, eyes fixed on something ahead. Ryan lifted his flashlight and saw it. A bend in the tunnel, right turn, reinforced again this time with cinder blocks stacked without mortar, as if someone had run out of time or care. Beyond it, darkness that swallowed light whole. Ryan felt something settle in his chest. Not fear, not quite. Grief, maybe, for what they were about to find. He turned back to Jacobs. "Radio, Roby. Tell her we're entering the second chamber, possibly another structure." Jacobs nodded silently, reaching for her comms. Ryan looked ahead one last time, then crawled forward into the place that didn't want to be seen. The tunnel narrowed again. By now, Ryan's arms were coated in a sheen of damp earth, his shirt clinging to his back like skin that didn't belong to him. Coda led the way in silence, belly low, head forward. Each breath came in short bursts, the air musty with rot and memory. Then Coda stopped, not suddenly, but gently. Like he'd stepped over something sacred. Ryan held still behind him. The flashlight beam caught a faint shimmer in the dirt, a glint of rusted metal, no larger than a child's backpack. Ryan set the flashlight down carefully and began brushing at the soil with his hands. The smell, intensified earth, sweat, and something old. Not foul, exactly, but forgotten. It took only a few seconds to uncover it. A lunchbox. Tin, dented, green with faded cartoon trucks barely visible beneath grime. A broken clasp. A corner curled inward as if once dropped from a great hater gripped too tightly by a small hand. Jacobs reached forward, her gloves trembling slightly. "Let me document it," she whispered. Ryan waited. The moment deserved witness. 3 photographs. Then she nodded. Ryan opened it. The lid creaked like a voice trying to speak after years of silence. Inside papers. Folded, frayed, damp. Drawings. Crayon on cheap white paper. Dozens. Maybe more. One showed stick figure 6 children in a row, all inside a square with no windows. A jagged red line ran through the top corner. Beside it, the word, hide. Another, a sun with no face, scribbled out in black. Another, a pair of hands reaching from below the ground toward a blue sky they'd never touch. And then, Ryan found it. A drawing in the middle, not like the others. Carefully colored, edges bent but not torn. A dog brown and black, unmistakable, with a red band around its neck. Standing beside a small girl with yellow pigtails and a green dress. They held hands her paws. She was smiling. Above them, written in shaky block letters with a red crayon, "Doggy will find us." Ryan's chest caved. Not literally, but close. Like someone had reached into him and pressed down firmly, slowly on everything he'd ever believed about good and evil and what gets left behind. He stared at the drawing for a long time. It wasn't just a picture. It was a promise. A message in a bottle buried in dirt instead of water. Jacobs knelt beside him, silent. Her voice cracked when she spoke. "You think this was Lily?" Ryan didn't answer. He didn't have to. The girl in the picture had the same tilt to her head, the same crescent curve to her smile they'd seen when Coda licked her cheek. He carefully flipped through the rest of the papers. Each one had a name. Some were scrawled, some practiced, some traced over again and again, as if the child was trying to remember who they were before someone tried to erase it. Milo, Cassie, Ben, Yo-Yo, Grace. Some of the names matched missing persons reports from counties they'd barely started to investigate. Some didn't match anything at all. Ghost with no files. Just crayon and dirt and hope. Ryan reached for the lid of the lunchbox but paused. One more drawing lay at the bottom. Slightly damp, the edges stuck to the tin. He peeled it free. A map. Crude, drawn in thick brown strokes with red arrows. A series of boxes connected by lines. In one, a scribbled X. In another, the word quiet, M. It wasn't to scale, but it was real. He looked at Jacobs. "We're not done," he said, voice hollow. "This tunnel doesn't just hide bodies, it hides intent." Jacobs didn't speak. She couldn't. Her hand pressed gently over her chest, her mouth tight with emotion. Coda whined softly. Ryan turned the lunchbox toward the light, giving the dog a better view of the picture of the little girl and the dog. Coda stepped forward and pressed his nose to it, then looked back at Ryan. The connection wasn't scientific, but it was undeniable. Ryan reclosed the lid slowly, as if tucking the drawings in for sleep they were never supposed to wake from. "We bring this out carefully," he told Jacobs. "Bag it. Seal it. This isn't just evidence." He paused. This is their story. The tunnel around them seemed to breathe. Dust swirled in the flashlight beam, like ash from a long dead fire. Somewhere behind them, voices echoed from the main crawl space. But Ryan stayed still a moment longer. He placed his hand gently on the dirt where the lunchbox had been, and whispered not a prayer, not a vow, but something between them. "Doggy found you." They kept moving forward, hunched low beneath the warped plywood beams and loose clumps of soil that seemed to sag with every breath the tunnel took. The air had shifted. It wasn't just colder, it was drier, tinged with the faint metallic scent of old wiring and insulation. Ryan could feel the shift through his palms, even before Coda stopped again. The tunnel widened, slightly then ended. Above them, a rectangular slab of metal, dulled by age but unmarked by mold or rot. A floor panel. Coda sniffed at the seams in Sathis' trained alert posture. Silent, intentional. Ryan reached up and pressed gently. It moved. Not much. Just enough to let in a whisper of filtered daylight from cracks above. A trace of dust floated down, catching the beam from Jacob's light like falling ash. Ryan turned to her. "Mark this. We're not under the daycare anymore." She blinked, confused. "What?" He tapped his GPS scanner. Coordinates flickered on the screen distinct from their earlier entries by at least 60 feet, just beyond the daycare's property line. Ryan exhaled slowly. "They built the tunnel across the jurisdiction boundary," he muttered. "Smart." N3. Jacobs looked up at the floor panel again, understanding dawning like a bruise. It wouldn't show up on a city inspection. Not if it exited somewhere else. Ryan nodded grimly. Outside the daycare's lease. Outside the cameras. Outside accountability. He pressed against the panel again, this time with intent, and it gave way with a soft groan, revealing splintered floorboards and stale air from an empty room above. Ryan pulled himself up first. The space they emerged into was nearly silent, long abandoned. Peeling wallpaper. A broken ceiling fan frozen mid-spin. Furniture stacked in the corner, draped with yellowing sheets. A Bible open on a desk, untouched by dust, as if someone wanted it to be seen but never read. The room reeked of intentional neglect. Jacob stepped in after him, sweeping her light in slow arcs. This used to be the old leasing office for the Strip, closed after the foreclosure back in 2011. Ryan checked the coordinates again, then cross-referenced them with county plat records pulled earlier. It fit. The property wasn't listed under the daycare's name. In fact, it wasn't listed under any name easily traced. A shell company, registered in Nevada. One of the dozen they'd already flagged under aliases tied to Evergreen Horizons and Golden Harvest. Different tax lot, Jacob said softly. Different paper trail. And a different floor to scream under. Ryan replied. They followed Coda to the far end of the room, where another floor vent was bolted shut. Old, rusted, barely visible but recent fingerprints marked the edge. Faint outlines. Small. Coda sniffed and whimpered. Jacobs crouched and opened her case, collecting samples. If they moved the children this way, they avoided every legal line drawn to protect them. Ryan's voice was low, brittle. They mapped the law like a river and tunneled underneath. The flashlight caught something taped to the wall behind a cupboard. A faded paper children's artwork again, crayon figures drawn with shaky lines. This time, 3 smiling stick figures waving next to a house. But one figure stood further off. A man, all in black. No face, just a line where the mouth should be. A red X over his chest. Ryan tore it down gently, folded it. They weren't just hiding bodies, they were hiding systems. This is methodical, coordinated. And Jacobs didn't respond. She didn't have to. The room said enough. Ryan stared at the open vent, the tunnel stretching back behind them. The floor beneath their feet no longer felt solid. Just a cover. Just a disguise. "How many exits do you think there are?" Jacobs asked. Ryan looked at Coda. Coda's ears twitched, but he didn't move. "We'll find out," Ryan said. "We always do." He turned back toward the hole they'd come through, lowered himself into the dark, and let the tunnel swallow him whole once more. The screen dimmed slightly as Elise Roby scrolled further through the state licensing database, her eyes narrowing with each flicker of a name that should have stayed buried. "Annabelle Curran," she murmured. "Then Harlow, and before that, Richardson." Ryan leaned over her shoulder, jaw tightening. Same woman, different name. Same fingerprints on every single form. What started as a follow-up to property records had spiraled fast into something far more systemic. 4 separate daycare facilities, 3 states, all owned or co-owned by Annabelle Carano Harlow, the quiet wife of Pastor Matthew Harlow. Each center had been flagged, once for expired certifications, twice for anonymous tips about unusual child-to-staff ratios, one for a sanitation complaint that cited chained playpens and nonverbal children left unattended. But every complaint, Elise noted grimly, had ended the same way, closed with no action. Ryan tapped his pen against the table. And look at the patterns. Each facility catered almost exclusively to low-income families, children on IEPs, speech delays, autism diagnoses, court-mandated foster care placements. They targeted the ones least likely to be believed, Elise said quietly. Kids who already had trouble talking, or who had no one to advocate for them. And when someone did speak up, Ryan gestured toward the page, dropped every time. Elise clicked through to one archived news article, just a few lines buried deep in a local paper from Nebraska dated 8 years ago. A small daycare had shut down due to a zoning violation. A building official quoted, "Records couldn't be verified. The matter is closed." But in the corner of the image, behind a smiling woman with a clipboard, stood a child, maybe 3, hands clenched, eyes empty. Ryan felt Coda stir under the desk. His ears twitched, sensing the shift in air, in energy. They made it look like failure, Elise said, like just another case of underfunded services. But this was curated, intentional. Ryan nodded slowly. It's not just about abuse. It's about selection. He stood and crossed the room to a whiteboard now cluttered with names and pins and timelines. He circled the last 3 facilities. Each had shut down after internal audits were scheduled. Each transferred ownership to shell companies just months before closure. Golden Harvest Development, Larkspur Child Services, MJB Holdings. All tracks led back to the same tax attorney in Maryland. All papers filed under different aliases. But the signature, slants identical. Handwriting didn't lie. Neither did motive. They hid behind faith, Ryan muttered. Behind quiet neighborhoods, behind community trust. He flipped through a social media post Elise had printed earlier. A local church newsletter. Grace Beacon, 4 years ago. Special thanks to Sister Annabelle for opening her heart and her home to God's littlest lambs. A photo of her smiling arms around 3 children, all nonverbal. One of them with a sensory vest zipped tightly over his chest. Elise traced her finger over the caption. She knew which kids would never scream loud enough. Ryan didn't answer. He didn't have to, because somewhere beneath the surface of suburbia, something was still rotting, and it had worn the mask of compassion for far too long. The file room at the county CPS office still smelled like toner and old linoleum clean on the surface, but too sterile, too quiet. Elise Roby flashed her badge. Detective Roby, Precinct 6. I called ahead. Oh. The clerk, a young woman with tired eyes and a tight ponytail, gestured toward the counter. You're looking for files tied to what again? Any licensing reviews or incident reports connected to Evergreen Horizons, Grace Beacon Daycare, or Golden Harvest Development, Elise replied. Specifically from 2016 to 2020. The woman typed for a moment, then frowned. Funny. That batch shows as accessed last month. Elise's brow furrowed. By whom? The clerk turned the monitor slightly. System shows a badge sign-in. Initials ER. Elise blinked. I didn't pull those files. The clerk hesitated. Right. And here's the thing. None of our employees have those initials. I ran that discrepancy last week during our monthly audit and flagged it. Supervisor said it was probably an out-of-district consult. But you don't share badge access across districts, Elise said slowly. Do you? No, we don't. Elise stared at the screen. The name field was blank just. The timestamp, entry point, and badge ID, ER17. 17 minutes logged in, the clerk added. Then the whole cabinet's inventory was marked in review. And after that, the woman's face tightened. The oldest records incident logs, licensing reports, site inspections from 2016 to 2018, they're gone. Gone how? As in physically missing. We keep hard copies for all flagged cases in the vault. They're not supposed to leave this floor. The silence wrapped around them like something stale. Elise could feel it press against her skin. She pulled out her notebook. Who else knows about this? No one outside the building, the clerk said quietly. I didn't want to get anyone in trouble, but when I heard what happened with the daycare, she glanced over her shoulder, lowered her voice. There's something else. Elise nodded. Go on. I was interning here in 2019. A woman came in with a consultant Badgino photo, just initials. ER, same as this one. She said she was with a state review board doing cross-county audits. What did she look like? Mid-30s, blonde, professional butt-off. The kind of polite where it feels practiced. Elise's stomach dropped. Annabelle Harlow is brunette. I didn't say it was her, the woman replied. But she wasn't here to ask about the files. She already knew what cabinet to pull. Elise leaned forward, and no one questioned it. Back then we were shorthanded. She had the lanyard, knew the language. People assumed she was cleared. After she left, I noticed the file inventory was off. Elise scribbled the details. You said she signed in. Do you still have the security log? The clerk hesitated, then nodded slowly. I saved a copy, just in case. She pulled a USB drive from her desk drawer and handed it over. Her hands were shaking. I know I should have reported it sooner, but it felt like no one wanted to know. Elise looked at her, voice low. You're not wrong. Back at the precinct, Ryan sat with the USB plugged into a secured terminal. The access log came up clean to clean. Each digital signature had a timestamp, but no trace of a MAC address. No motion cam footage tied to the login point. It was like someone had slid between layers of the system. This isn't just deletion, he said. It's surgical. Someone knew what to erase and how to make it look routine. Elise stared at the screen. They didn't just burn the paper trail. They're bleaching the walls behind it. Ryan clicked open one more folder and anomaly the clerk had flagged. A scanned form with smudged ink and a faded stamp. It was dated the 3rd of June, 2017. A transfer notice. CPS case number 01987GH. The child's name was blacked out. But the location? Golden Harvest Development. Special Needs Services. Observation only. Length of stay, 92 days. Outcome, no longer in system. Elise exhaled. That phrase again. Not discharged, not transferred, not adopted, just no longer in system. Ryan sat back, eyes burning from the screen. They knew, he said. They've always known. The message came in at 11:42 p.m. Jenna, I'm sorry it's late, but I think I remember something. Something about the toy chest. Nap room. Ryan was already half awake, lying in bed with his phone face up on the nightstand, the screen lighting up the dark like a breath held too long. He sat up slowly, the room silent, except for Coda's rhythmic breathing at the foot of the bed. The German Shepherd stirred when Ryan moved, one ear lifting. Ryan typed quickly. Ryan, I'm here. You okay? What do you remember? It took a full minute before the typing dots returned. Jenna. There was a girl. She was younger than me, quiet. She said she was going to leave something behind in case she never came back. A bracelet. Ryan's pulse skipped. Jenna. She hid it in the toy chest in the nap room. She told me not to tell, not to open it either. I didn't. But now, it's all I can think about. Coda let out a low chuff, sensing the shift in Ryan's posture as quiet urgency. Ryan replied carefully. Ryan, that's important, Jenna. Do you remember her name? Jenna. No, just her eyes. Green like moss. Always looking at the door. Ryan read the message twice. Green eyes. A bracelet. A warning whispered by a child who never came back. He stood, grabbing his jacket from the chair and slipping into his boots without turning on the light. Coda was already up, tail still, alert and ready. This wasn't something to wait on. By the time Ryan pulled up to the taped-off property that had once been Grace Beacon, the air had turned colder. Dawn was hours away, but the world already felt on edge. He clicked on his flashlight, passed the outer tape, and entered the quiet carcass of what used to be a daycare. Inside, everything was still, silent. The scent of aged wood and distant bleach lingered, but the floor beneath his boots was dustier than before, as if untouched for weeks. As if time had pulled the building inward, he and Coda moved together down the hall, the flashlight beam cutting through the dark like memory itself. When they reached the nap room, Ryan paused. The door was still cracked from their last search. Find it, he said quietly, and Coda stepped forward. The toy chest was still there wedged under a peeling mural of cartoon clouds, chipped and faded. Ryan knelt, his hand brushing the cold wood. The lid creaked when opened, the sound somehow too loud for the moment. Inside, old dolls with missing limbs, Alphabet blocks dulled from wear, a single blanket folded unevenly. Nothing looked out of place. Nothing looked like it had waited 7 years for someone to return. Coda sniffed once then again and let out a soft, low whine. He looked up at Ryan. Ryan reached deeper, pushing aside the fabric, the loose toys. Then his fingers brushed metal. It was thin, tucked into the seam between the bottom slats. A child would have had to press it with both hands, flattening it just so it wouldn't slide. He pulled it out slowly. A bracelet. Threaded beads, some broken, some cracked. The elastic was frayed, but still intact. A charm dangled at the center. A tiny brass dog bone. Ryan turned it over in his palm. There were initials carved with something blunt and shaky. He closed his fist. Back in the truck, Ryan messaged Jenna again. Ryan, you did good. I found it. A bracelet. The initials say MH. Anything else coming back? A few minutes passed. Jenna, her name might have been Maya. She had a twin. Or said she did. I think something happened to her sister. Maya didn't smile after that. Ryan stared out the windshield. The trees across the street swayed gently in the wind. Like shadows, remembering something. He looked down at the bracelet again. Maya. MH green eyes. A promise made in silence. In case I don't come back. Coda let out a slow, deep sigh and laid his head on Ryan's knee. Ryan whispered, You were right, girl. Even back then, they knew they needed someone like you to come looking. M. The door groaned open under Ryan's gloved hand. Filtered daylight spilling in behind him and Roby. Dust swirled like ghosts, unsettled by memory. They were back in the nap room, again. But this time, not alone, not off the clock, and not without a warrant. Clearance had been granted after Jenna's message, and the bracelet Ryan had logged it, photographed it, entered it into evidence. But something told him the toy chest wasn't done speaking. Roby walked beside him, silent but alert, hand resting near the grip of his holstered sidearm. The kind of silence that had weight. Neither of them spoke as they moved toward the toy chest again. Coda padded forward ahead of them. No leash, just instinct-this body language shifting the closer he came. He sniffed once, low and deliberate. Then again, then he sat, back straight, head still. That posture again. Ryan didn't speak. He dropped to one knee and began removing the contents they'd moved the night before. But instead of going for the compartment where the bracelet had been, he pried gently at the bottom slats to the left, near the broken hinge where a piece of wood had splintered slightly. Almost nothing, almost invisible. A loose panel gave way under his hand. His breath hitched. Folded in the narrow cavity tucked behind the curve of the chest's lining was a small plastic hospital wristband, yellowed at the edges, but still readable under the grime. He pulled it out gently and turned on his penlight. Cotton M. His throat went dry. Roby stepped forward. What is it? Ryan turned the band so Roby could see the name. Caden M., he said quietly. Reported missing from Fresno in 2022. They said he vanished while waiting outside a pediatric therapy center. 2 states away, Roby murmured, eyes narrowing. Ryan flipped the band over. That's when he saw it. Written in what looked like red, crayon childish, but shaky, as if pressed with urgency, were 5 heartbreaking words. Doggy will find us. Roby let out a long breath. Same phrase as the drawing in the tunnel. Ryan nodded. Same handwriting too, I think. Or at least the same child. Coda was still sitting, watching them quietly. Not moving, just waiting. Ryan knelt beside him, gently resting a hand on his thick fur. You did, buddy, he whispered. You found him. Outside, Ryan stood beneath the overcast sky, watching as the forensics team logged the wristband into evidence. His fingers still carried the scent of mold and age. But it wasn't that which lingered, it was the echo of those 5 words. Doggy will find us. It wasn't just a child's hope. It was a message left in faith, left in terror, left like a flare someone wasn't sure anyone would ever see. And somehow, they had. Roby joined him, holding the bagged bracelet from earlier. They left breadcrumbs, he said. Bits of themselves. Just enough to hold on to. Ryan's jaw flexed, eyes distant. That toy chest's a time capsule for every kid who thought no one was coming. But they didn't just hide things, they recorded what mattered. What they prayed someone would find. Roby looked down at the bracelet, then up at Ryan. "Let's make damn sure we do." Ryan nodded once. The cold wind cut across his face, but he didn't move. His hand rested gently on Coda's collar. Inside that broken building, under cartoon murals that had once tried to mask the silence, the children had fought to be remembered. And piece by piece through paper, beads, crayon, and fear they were finally being heard. The office was dimly lit, a halo of warm lamplight casting shadows across a wall crowded with printouts, thumbtacks, and strands of red string that looked like veins mapping something long dead. Ryan stood in front of it, motionless. Each pushpin marked a property, each name scribbled beneath it. Evergreen Horizons, Golden Harvest, Lighthouse Family Development, Grace Beacon Ministries, Radiant Beginnings, LLC. Different fonts, different states, but the same pattern. They all cycled through one shell company, buried under dozens of offshore registration filings and P.O. boxes that led to nowhere but locked doors or abandoned buildings. Elise Roby sat hunched over a laptop at the table behind him, blue light reflecting in her glasses. "I've been cross-referencing zoning permits with corporate filings. Every one of those daycares passed inspection, but not by the county. Private contractors, same 3 names on the forms. Same licensing agency?" Ryan asked without turning. "Numbered different agencies, different states. But the filings were always approved within 48 hours, some of them backdated. Someone greased this through hard." Ryan nodded slowly, his hand brushing a cluster of thumbtacks marked red cases involving children later reported missing. 37 sites across 5 states, he murmured, and every single one of them links back to Argon Holt, LLC. Roby looked up. "A tech firm?" Ryan shook his head. "That's what I thought. But it's a paper company, formed in the Caymans, owned by a trust out of Zurich, managed by an investment group that doesn't exist anymore." Roby exhaled. "So they didn't just disappear kids, they disappeared the trail." Ryan turned and walked to the table, placing the bagged hospital wristband beside the bracelet and the drawing from the lunchbox. Together, they looked like relics from a time that should never have existed. "It's not random," he said. "Not neglect, not isolated abuse. This was industrialized, systematic. They designed it this way." Roby clicked a few keys and pulled up a digital schematic and overlay of the properties by date of operation. Each dot blinked like a pulse across the map. Ryan stared. "That's a schedule, rotational. 18-month cycles," Roby confirmed. Once attention built up in one location, licensing issues, complaints, they shut down, rebrand, and start again in another state. But the core names? They stay the same in the paperwork. Harlow, Curran, Green Street. Ryan's fingers tightened. And the kids? Most cases were ruled as runaway or custody disputes. Some were never reported, especially the nonverbal ones. Children on the spectrum, or with speech delays. No parents to advocate. Or the parents were convinced they were imagining things. Ryan lowered his gaze to Coda, who was lying beside the wall, head resting on his paws. Silent, but watching. The red crayon flashed again in his mind. Doggy will find us. They had found them, but the scale was worse than anything he'd allowed himself to believe. "We need to go federal," Roby said. Ryan nodded slowly. "But not through the front door. Not yet." She looked at him. "There's someone inside," he said quietly. "Someone burning records, slipping badges, controlling what gets buried and what gets flagged." Roby's expression hardened. "We don't know how far this goes." Ryan turned back to the map. The red lines were starting to converge. Property to shell company. Shell to name. Name to photo. Photo to wristband. It no longer felt like a conspiracy. It felt like a machine code, deliberate and old. Something that had been humming just beneath the surface for years, maybe decades. And now it was cracked open. Dawn in eastern Kentucky was usually a quiet thing mist curling through hardwood hollows, songbirds tuning their throats before the first pickup rumbled down a gravel road. But on this morning, the silence broke under the slow, deliberate crunch of tactical boots and the low murmur of radios set to whisper. The cabin sat half-collapsed against a hillside of skinny poplars, roof patched with sheet metal, chimney cracked like a fault line. To the casual hiker, it looked abandoned, no power line, no mailbox, just a dirt path rutted by rain. Yet a single tread pattern Michelin LTX fresh marked the mud near the porch. And the chimney vented a ribbon of smoke too clean for a fireplace. Ryan crouched behind the rear fender of an unmarked Tahoe, frost stinging his knuckles through the glove seams. Beside him, Detective Elise Roby checked her magazine one last time, face pale in the cobalt dawn. Coda waited in the back compartment of a second vehicle, tail still, breath fogging the plexiglass and standby in case they needed a nose better than any warrant. Across the clearing, federal marshals fanned out, their silhouettes swallowing the mist. No shouting, no sirens. The element of surprise was all they had. Elijah Harlow, birth name Rosh, had been one step ahead for 15 years. Today, they meant to take the step away. "Go," the team lead mouthed. Boots moved. Gravel popped. A crow launched from a branch, cawing like a broken alarm. Two marshals took the porch. The battering ram met the warped door with a splintering crack. Ryan's pulse thudded once, then the house swallowed everyone. Inside, a shout, "Hands where I can see them!" No gunfire. Just the scuffle of furniture, the scrape of metal on floorboards, and the dull thunk of a body shoved against a wall. 30 seconds later, Elijah Ross emerged in plastic cuffs, marshals on either side. He was thinner than the driver's license. Photo beard scrubby, hair shaved to stubble but the eyes matched. Restless, marble blue, forever calculating. Ryan stepped forward into the gray light. "Elijah Ross, you're under arrest for conspiracy, trafficking, and interstate child endangerment." Ross didn't answer. He didn't even flinch. His gaze floated past Ryan to the tree line, like a man measuring how far a ghost could run. A marshal brought out the canvas duffel they'd found under the bed. 3 burner phones, all wiped. A stack of fresh passports, Canadian, Mexican, Croatian, each bearing Ross's photo and a different alias. 10,000 in mixed bills, and a matte black laptop sealed with biometric encryption. He was packed and ready, the marshal muttered. Roby flipped through the passports, jaw tightening. None older than 6 months. Ryan turned back to Ross. "You think silence is insurance? The files we've got will speak louder than you ever will." Still nothing. Just that distant gaze, as if the cabin and the cuffs and the plea bargains waiting miles away were a passing dream. A rumble of tires on gravel announced the evidence van. Coda released a single bark from inside his crate-low, instinctual, the sound that once warned Ryan of IEDs buried in foreign dust. Ross's head snapped toward the noise, the first crack in his composure. Ryan saw it, the flicker of recognition, the memory of a dog pulling secrets from under bright rugs and rotten floors. He leaned in, voice low. "You remember that sound? It's the reason you're standing in shackles instead of walking free." Ross's jaw twitched, but he said nothing. Marshals guided him into the van, steel doors slamming shut. The hush that followed felt heavier than any siren. The forest held its breath, as though the trees themselves needed a moment to believe the nightmare had finally been dragged from their roots. Roby exhaled, white vapor vanishing in the dawn. "One down," she said, almost a whisper. Ryan watched the van's brake lights glow red against the fog. Somewhere behind those walls, a laptop waited to be cracked. Passports waited to be cataloged. A silent man waited to decide whether his secrets were worth more than the years he'd trade for keeping them. But herein, the chill between first light and full day, Ryan allowed himself a single, fragile thought. The circle is closing. Not closed. Not yet. But the break in the chain was real, tangible, cuffed in the back of a federal van, and heading toward a courthouse that wouldn't look away. Coda barked once more, softer this time, as if affirming the unspoken. Ryan opened the tailgate and let the shepherd hop down onto the frozen leaves. He knelt, scratching the gray-flecked fur behind the dog's ears. "Good work, partner," he murmured. Coda nudged his chest, amber eyes reflecting the weak sunrise. For the first time in weeks, Ryan felt the ground steady beneath his boots. The hunt was not over, but the prey was no longer running. Terre Haute's Greyhound station was the kind of place people passed through without remembering flickering vending machines, cracked plastic seats, the smell of diesel, and last night coffee clinging to the fluorescent air. Nobody looked twice at the woman in the oatmeal-colored trench coat who bought a one-way ticket to Wichita at 4:37 a.m. Nobody but the agents who had been waiting since midnight. Annabelle Curran Harlowhair dyed a muted chestnut, glasses too large for her face paused at gate 3. Clutching a leather purse that seemed to weigh more than a purse should, her gaze swept the room in practiced arcs. Exits, cameras, uniforms, escape routes. She didn't see anything unusual. That was the point. 2 plainclothes deputies flanked her as she stepped toward the boarding line. "Ma'am," one said, badge flipping open just enough to gleam. "Indiana State Police. Could you come with us, please?" Annabelle froze a fraction of a second, just long enough for calculation, not panic, then smiled politely. "I'm catching a bus. Is something wrong?" Behind her, the other deputy eased the purse from her shoulder and set it on the floor. "Ticket can wait. Hands where I can see them." The cuffs clicked before the nearest passenger realized anything was wrong. Annabelle's smile fell away, replaced by a flat stare that didn't bother with innocence. She asked only one question. "Who talked?" The deputies said nothing. Outside, sunrise bled across the parking lot, turning the frost on windshields the color of old bruises. Ryan heard about the arrest an hour later, standing in the precinct war room where map pins glowed under halogen lamps like constellations of grief. Detective Roby put the call on speaker. "Terre Haute PD has Curran in custody," the sergeant on the line reported. She had 3 prepaid Visa cards, $8,000 cash, and a forged Social Security card under the name Irene Gable. Ryan exchanged a glance with Roby. "Any statement?" "Not a word so far. Attorney already on the way paid through an offshore escrow we're still tracing." Roby scribbled a note. "We'll send copies of the indictments as soon as the DA signs, and tell them to photograph every inch of that purse. Hidden USBs keep showing up." When the call ended, Roby exhaled. One serpent's head off the table. Ryan nodded, but his eyes were on the evidence. Board names, arrows, property deeds. The circle was shrinking, yet for every arrest, another line of the web seemed to appear. A tech pushed through the door, phone in hand. "Detective, you need to see this." The press conference in Bloomington had been scheduled for a different purpose and unrelated narcotics. But midway through the podium, microphones caught an unexpected announcement. 2 former employees of Bright Days Early Learning had just walked into the county sheriff's office and asked for protective custody. Ryan and Roby raced down in an unmarked sedan, Coda asleep in the crate behind them, the tires hissing over wet pavement. By the time they arrived, the lobby was cordoned off, reporters pressing against glass like gulls. Inside interview 2, the first woman, Clarice Hughes, clutched a styrofoam cup that rattled against her teeth. "I didn't know where else to go," she breathed. "After the news about that dog, I knew it was over." She slid a thumb drive across the table. "Attendance logs, shredding schedules, stuff Annabelle made us delete." The second woman, Cynthia Delgado, sat hunched beside her, eyes damp. "I quit 2 years ago," she whispered, "but I still have nightmares. Kids in that crawl space. I can hear them knocking under the floor." Ryan leaned forward. "Why come in now?" "Because the pastor's gone, Annabelle's gone, and the rest will burn us to keep quiet," Clarice said, voice cracking. "You have to understand, they kept lists. They knew which kids nobody checked on." Roby's pen froze over her notebook. "You're saying there are more facilities?" "A dozen, maybe more," Cynthia said. "They moved us around to consult. Every time we walked into a new building, the paint was fresh, but the voices sounded the same." She swallowed hard. "Always the quiet ones. Autism. Foster kids. Little ones who screamed in the wrong frequency." Clarice added, almost pleading, "We'll testify. Just keep us safe." Ryan looked at Roby. In her eyes, he saw the same mix of horror and grim vindication. The map on their wall wasn't just theory. It was a user manual for industrialized cruelty. Back at the precinct, the red strings multiplied. Each new testimony added Pin Chicago, Little Rock, Mobile, Akron. Every location cross-referenced with property deeds traced to the same trust. Every trust funneled through Argon Holt LLC, now flagged in 6 countries. Ryan stared at the spreading constellation. For the first time, the pattern was undeniably not rogue abuse, but a franchise of silence. Roby tapped a new index card to the board. Clarice Hughes, cooperating witness. Below it, Cynthia Delgado, cooperating witness. 2 more heads, she said softly. "And they're talking." Ryan's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number pinged his locked screen. "Stop digging, or more kids go quiet." The words chilled him more than the morning frost. He showed Roby. Her jaw clenched. They still think fear is leverage. Ryan's grip tightened around the phone. His gaze shifted to Coda, sleeping now but ready the moment duty called. "Let them try," he said, voice low but certain. "We're not the ones running." Outside, the December wind howled down the alley like something wounded, but in the war-lit glow of the precinct, the board on the wall no longer looked like chaos. It looked like a road map leading straight to the heart of an empire that believed children were commodities and silence was currency. And that empire was beginning to crumble. The precinct's conference room once, just 4 beige walls, and a rattling projector had transformed into something between a newsroom and a mausoleum. Photos of toddlers and grade schoolers papered every inch of cork. Sketches and crayon pages rescued from tunnels hung beside DMV headshots and school portraits. Strings of red yarn connected faces to dates, dates to addresses, addresses to invoices stamped with shell company seals. Ryan stood at the center, marker uncapped, the smell of dry erase chemicals mixing with stale coffee and adrenaline. Detective Roby clicked through yet another slide on the projector. A grainy Polaroid of a boy with a gap-toothed grin, timestamp 2018. Beneath it, CPS intake file. Caden M., age 5, speech delay, reported missing, Fresno, CA, 2022. 1, Roby said, voice steady. Matched by wristband and dental records. Confirmed alive 3 hours ago at St. Vincent's Pediatric ICU. Non-verbal but responsive. A soft cheer rippled through the room quick. Subdued. The kind of relief that knows celebration is still premature. She advanced the slide. A charcoal sketch from the tunnel wall. A stick figure with green crayon eyes and a jagged red line across her chest. 2. Maya H. Illinois Amber Alert, 2019. Sister confirmed the drawing style. DNA pending. Ryan wrote Maya, possible, on the board. The name joining a growing column titled Found, Pending, next to it. Unaccounted still, twice as long. Illustrations, hospital bracelets, clandestine attendance sheet severy scrap pulled from crawl spaces and hidden room shad become forensic Rosetta Stones. Analysts cross-referenced color pencil doodles of superhero shoes with purchase receipts. They traced a half-legible name scribbled on a sippy cup to a Head Start roster in Arkansas. The machine that silenced children had left paper-cut-sized clues. Now those cuts bled truth. Roby clicked again. The projector showed a scanned page from a behavior log seized at Bright Days. Columns marked Speech, Colorado Impliance, Re-ED Handoff. Next to one entry, a smiley face and the initials TW. 3, Roby said. We believe TW is Travis Wellington, missing from Topeka, 2020. Interstate transport confirmed by toll booth cam in Missouri. Same van listed to Golden Harvest Fleet. Ryan circled another state line on the map. Red yarn stretched farther, a constellation of stolen miles. Around the table, FBI analysts and state troopers bent over laptops. A tech from Crimes Against Children scrolled through a database, voice hushed. We're at 11 strong ID6 living recoveries, 2 presumed, 3 still unknown. Age range 4 to 9, all flagged special needs. Coda, lying at Ryan's feet, lifted his head when the tech said unknown as if the very word had a scent the dog could track. Ryan knelt, rubbing the shepherd's graying muzzle. We're not done yet, partner. M. Another photo appeared. A birthday party snapshot balloons, sheet cake. A little girl caught mid-laugh. In the background, the unmistakable mural of Sunflower Nest. A posted label read Ella J. Missing Baton Rouge, 2007. Roby's voice softened. That picture came from a camera card hidden in Annabelle's purse. Metadata proves she was in the building 2 months after it opened. Silence settled. Every face around the table hardened. 11 names. 11 childhoods rerouted into darkness because a handful of adults discovered a profit in silence. Ryan uncapped a red marker and wrote Ella J. pending. Underneath, he added a 12th bullet point without a name, just a question mark. The space felt heavier than ink. As he stepped back, the door opened. An FBI agent leaned in, holding a fresh manila envelope. "Intercept from Delaware Financial Crimes Unit," she said. "Mortgage records for a property purchased by Argon Holt in Tennessee vacant summer camp. Miles of private forest. Closed last year." She set the envelope on the table. It landed like another heartbeat. Ryan looked to Roby. "We keep finding doors," he said, voice rough. "Every one we kick in opens 5 more. Roby met his gaze, tired but unwavering. "Then we keep kicking. The list gets shorter every time." He glanced at the board again. The children's eyesome smiling. Some vacant seemed to stare back, asking what came next. What came next was work. Long hours, more warrants, more nights in crawl spaces with stale air and memories etched in crayon. But the pattern was no longer rumor. It was mapped, taped, and written in black and red across a wall that now pulsed with evidence. Ryan capped the marker. "Start the subpoenas for that Tennessee property," he said, "and flag every transport permit Argon Holt ever filed. M." He reached down, tapped Coda's collar. The dog rose, tail giving a single thump against the linoleum. "For every line they tried to erase," Ryan whispered mostly to himself, "we'll carve another one in stone." Behind him, the projector advanced to the next slide. A collage of stick figures, one large dog drawn beside every child. Above them, in shaky red crayon, a message stretched across the screen. "Doggy found us." The war room grew, but so did the certainty that its map would one day be complete and empty of question marks. The children's wing of the Crestfield Trauma Recovery Center smelled of lavender sanitizer and something softer like paperbacks left open in the sun. Hallway lights were dimmed to dusk. Footprints hushed by thick carpet so no sudden sound could jar a fragile mind awake. Room 214 was at the far end, painted a pale ocean blue. On the door hung a construction paper heart with glitter letters that read Lily. Each morning the nurses added a new sticker stars, ladybugs, tiny paw prints counting days since her rescue. 12 now. Ryan lingered outside the doorway a moment, smoothing invisible wrinkles from his jacket. Coda waited at heel. Therapy vest fitted snug over his ribs. Silver fur brushed, though a few rogue tufts still curled around his ears. The German shepherd's tail gave a single sweep against the wall, as if reminding Ryan this visit wasn't about him. Inside, sunlight fractured through pastel curtains onto a hospital bed half raised. Lily Morgan sat cross-legged amid plush animals, rabbit, giraffe, a floppy brown dog that looked suspiciously like Coda. IV line taped to her hand, finger splint on the left thumb. She hummed off-key, drawing crayon swirls across a sketchpad. Beside her, Stephanie Morgan eyes rimmed red but bright, with something fierce looked up as Ryan tapped lightly on the frame. "Officer Mercer," she breathed, rising. "I didn't know you were coming." "Ryan, please," he said, stepping in. "Just wanted to check on you both outside of reports and signatures." Coda padded forward, head low in gentle greeting. Lily's hum stopped. Crayon froze mid-circle. Her eyes widened, green catching sunlight like river glass. "Doggy," she whispered. The word seemed to ring in the air, small but sure, slicing through layers of antiseptic and therapy schedules. She slid off the bed as nurses watched from the corridor, carefully detangling her IV tubing. Stephanie let out a trembling laugh sob, guiding the line as Lily knelt on the rug. Coda lowered himself, tail thumping exactly twice enough the exuberant wag of parades, but a measured beat, patient and calming. Lily touched his collar tag, lips moving as though reading Koda. "She asks for him every morning," Stephanie told Ryan, voice thin with gratitude and exhaustion. "First thing she'd do is signs for doggy." She mimed the ASL gesture Lily's therapist had taught her, thumb and middle finger coming together twice, the sign for dog. Ryan smiled, throat tight. "He's been asking about her, too." He glanced at the plush animals. "I see she has backup security now." Stephanie brushed Lily's hair, newly washed, still uneven where nurses had clipped away mats of dust. They gave her the stuffed one on day 3, when she started sleeping more than an hour at a time. "Progress," Ryan said softly. Stephanie's gaze drifted to the tiny scars on Lily's wrist, where IV needles had bruised. "She'll be okay eventually. Doctors say kids heal in ways we can't see." She swallowed. "But sometimes at night, she presses her ear to the mattress like she's listening for something under the floor." Ryan's heart clenched. He crouched to Lily's level, letting Coda's warmth radiate between them. "Hey, superstar," he said. "I heard you're drawing again." Lily nodded. From the sketchpad, she tore out a page and held it up. A big brown-black dog beside a stick girl with yellow hair. Both smiled under a sun that had a face this time, one drawn with pink cheeks instead of crossed-out mouths. Ryan took it like a priceless confession. "That's us, right? Anyone who sees this will know you're safe now." Say. Lily touched the dog's ear in the picture, then Coda's real ear, mirroring the motion. Her voice was barely audible. "Safe." Stephanie pressed fingers to her lips. Tears slipped anyway. Ryan rose, leaning toward Stephanie so Lily wouldn't hear. "We're lining up a therapy canine program here. Coda will be first volunteer. If Lily's comfortable, he can visit whenever doctors allow." Stephanie nodded quickly. Yes, please. She calms when he's near. It's different from human comfort." Ryan understood. There were hurts only a heartbeat on 4 legs could reach. He turned toward the doorway, giving mother and daughter a moment. Nurses slipped in to check vitals. Lily curled beside Coda on the rug, small fingers twining gray fur like a lifeline. In the hall, Ryan exhaled the weight he'd carried in. Closure was a myth, investigators told themselves. But moments like this one on crayon paper, a child whispering safe, were enough to keep moving. Roby waited near the elevator, phone buzzing with new search warrants. "How is she?" she asked. "She smiles now," Ryan said, holding up the drawing. Roby's shoulders eased. "Good." They walked toward the exit. Behind them, Lily's Laffa sound still fragile, but unmistakably alive floated through the hallway, chasing shadows back under closed doors. Scars remained. Nightmares would resurface. Yet in room 214, a little girl with yellow crayon hair believed the world could be kind again, because a dog had proved monsters weren't the only things that lived beneath the floor. And that, Ryan thought as Coda trotted beside him, was more justice than any courtroom could promise. The wrecking ball swung like a slow-motion pendulum, its steel surface reflecting a sky too bright for what lay beneath. A hush settled over the crowd, gathered behind safety barriers. Parents, reporters, off-duty officers, workers in neon vests. Some held candles, though dawn light made their flames pale. Others clasped printed photographs of children whose faces still hovered between found and missing on the precinct wall. Sunflower Nest Daycare, butter yellow and stenciled with cartoon bees now, stood stripped of siding, windows gaping like sockets. Each swing of the ball sent a puff of plaster and secrets into the air. Ryan watched from the command cordon, hard hat low over his eyes, Coda sitting at heel. Every impact felt personal, as if the building itself resisted confession until the very end. With a final crack, the naproom corner buckled. The roof sagged, then collapsed inward, burying the trapdoor that had hidden too much for too long. Applause rose hesitant at first, then louder. Not celebratory, but cathartic. Ryan exhaled. Sometimes, justice looked like rubble. 2 months later, winter sunlight spilled through the open beams of what had once been Grace Beacon Church. Where rotted pews had collected dust, contractors now framed bright offices and counseling suites. A banner stretched across temporary fencing, Crestfield Children's Advocacy and Protection Center, opening spring. Inside, sawdust hung in the air, mingling with fresh-cut pine and the faint scent of new paint. Ryan toured the skeleton hallway with director Maya Caldwell, a veteran CPS investigator who'd agreed to run the center. Behind them trailed volunteer carpenters, social workers, trauma therapists each, taking notes on square footage and wiring needs. "This wing will be forensic interview rooms," Maya said, pointing to studded partitions. "Soundproof, child-friendly decor. Next door, medical suites, sane nurses on call 24/7, and from ACE." "And that corner?" Ryan asked, nodding toward a space under the remodeled steeple, sunlight pouring through restored stained glass panes. She smiled. "Therapy dog's den. Figured we'd better budget for chew toys." Coda, as if understanding, gave a soft huff and trotted ahead, sniffing freshly delivered carpet rolls. Workers paused to scratch his ears. The dog had become both mascot and morale, boost-proof that vigilance could be gentle. Outside, along the newly poured walkway between the daycare ruins and the church, sculptor Luis Ramirez finished setting a waist-high granite plinth. He brushed dust from its face, revealing letters etched deep in black. "In honor of those found, and those still missing, courage is the quiet paw that scratches until we listen." Below the inscription, a bronze relief of a German shepherd looked out toward what would soon become a healing garden, lilac bushes, benches shaped like open books, a small fountain murmuring in perpetual lullaby. Families gathered for the informal unveiling. Stephanie Morgan held Lily's hand. Logan's parents brought him in a bright red coat. Other caregivers came clutching court papers or hope. When the tarp dropped, silence rippled through them, grief and gratitude braided into one breath. Ryan stepped forward only when Maya beckoned. Cameras clicked. Local news filmed for the evening slot. But the moment felt strangely intimate, as if the statue's bronze gaze invited only whispers. He placed a palm on the cold metal paw. Beside him, Lily tiptoed, pressing a paper daisy between the dog's bronze toes. "Thank you," she said, all vowels steady now after weeks of therapy. Stephanie wiped her eyes, but let the tear fall. Healing, Ryan thought, was sometimes measured in the freedom to cry without fear. A reporter edged closer. "Officer Mercer, any comment on today's dedication?" He glanced at the crowd builders with sawdust in their beards, detectives with case folders under arms, parents clinging to framed 8x10 photographs. Then he looked at Coda, whose nose rested on the granite as if reading. "Buildings failed these kids," Ryan said, voice low but clear. "Systems failed them. What didn't fail was persistence of witnesses, of good officers, of a dog who never stopped listening. This center is a promise that we'll listen sooner next time." Applause. Gentle as rainfall answered. Somewhere behind the line, Clarice Hughes and Cynthia Delgado watched, escorted by victim services advocates. They traded anonymity for testimony. The center would house the program funding their new identities. As the crowd dispersed, Ryan lingered with Roby near the memorial. Winter light slanted along, touching the words still missing with a glow that felt neither warm nor cold, just true. "Think it's enough?" Roby asked quietly. "It's a start," Ryan said. He scratched Coda's neck. The dog leaned into his leg, content. "For every wall they built, we'll raise 10 doors. And keep them open." Roby nodded, eyes on the rubble pile where Sunflower Nest had stood. Already cranes had cleared half the site. But fragments of rainbow wall remained a warning in broken pastel. Wind stirred, carrying the scent of pine and distant smoke. Lily's laughter drifted from the garden, chasing a flock of paper butterflies volunteers had taped to stakes. For a heartbeat, the world sounded the way childhood should, unafraid. Ryan turned toward the future Child Protection Center rising from repurposed faith and fresh lumber. He thought of tunnels collapsing, of files resurfacing, of names on a board growing faint as children were found. The storm had passed, but rebuilding would take seasons. He was ready for the long work of dawn. Downtown Crestfield smelled of wet pavement and cinnamon the morning the children's mural went up. A storm had washed the streets clean overnight, leaving brick walls damp and ready like blank pages thirsting for ink. 8 elementary schooler sleeves smudged with acrylic stood on milk crates along the side of Ramirez Bakery, brushes poised. Their teacher, Miss Alvarez, kept time with gentle reminders. Broad strokes first, details later. The centerpiece was already sketched, a German shepherd bounding through sunbeams that pierced a cracked ceiling, nose angled toward something unseen. Coda watched from the curb, ears forward, tail sweeping slow arcs whenever a child giggled. Ryan knelt beside him holding a travel mug, steam curling into the cold. "That's you, you know," he told the dog. "Better get used to it." Coda responded by leaning his full weight against Ryan's knee, content, unconcerned that he was becoming legend. Across the street, the bakery owner, Mrs. Ramirez, pinned a chalkboard sign beside the door. "Today's special hero biscuits. Peanut butter bones inspired by Sir Coda. 10% of proceeds fund Crestfield Children's Advocacy Center." Inside, the first batch cooled on wire Raxtony paw prints stamped in the dough. A reporter snapped photos through the window. Mrs. Ramirez waved him in, apron dusted with flour, pride shining brighter than the neon open sign. Back at the mural, the final colors bloomed. Cobalt sky, streaks of gold. Coda's coat rendered in layered browns that caught the light with startling life. One little boy, Logan, still skittish around strangers, but fearless, with a brush added, a small figure beside the dog. A girl with yellow crayon hair holding Coda's tail like a kite string. Miss Alvarez didn't correct the proportions. "Truth," she said, "doesn't need realism to be real." When the last stroke dried, the kids stepped back. Applause rose from parents and passers-by. Phones captured Coda tilting his head at the painted twin, nose twitching as if recognizing himself. Lily, bundled in a polka dot coat, toddled forward and touched the wall. "Doggy," she whispered, then turned and hugged the real one, tiny arms barely reaching around his chest. Cameras flashed, but Ryan watched the micro moment nobody else did. Coda closing his eyes, leaning down till forehead met child's hat Brima bow of gentle acknowledgement. 3 weeks later, Ryan sat in the corner booth of the bakery. Coda stretched beneath the table like a living hearthrug. A fresh printed hardback lay in Ryan's hands. The Dog Who Heard What Hearts Couldn't Say. On the cover, an illustration of Coda standing over a faint outline of a trapdoor, light erupting upward. Author credit read, "Story by Miss Jenna Grace, illustrated by the children of Crestfield." Ryan flipped pages slowly. Simple prose, bright art crayon textures, scanned into digital form. Chapter titles. Asterisk, the day the rug moved. Asterisk, whispers in the wood. Asterisk, scratches. You could only feel with your heart. Each ended with a question inviting kids to talk about secrets that hurt and helpers who listen. The back matter listed hotline numbers, therapy resources, and a dedication. To the quiet children, may the world finally learn your language. When he reached the final spread, Coda curled around a circle of children beneath a starry sky. Ryan swallowed hard. The stars were drawn as paw prints. Mrs. Ramirez arrived with 2 coffee refills and a small plate. "Special delivery," she said, placing a hero biscuit shaped like a medal in front of Coda. "On the house for our inspiration." Coda sniffed, looked to Ryan for permission. He nodded, and the dog crunched happily, crumbs sprinkling the tile like confetti. A bell jingled over the door. Detective Roby entered, snow dusting her shoulders. She slid into the opposite seat, eyeing the book. "First edition?" Ryan handed it over. "Hot off the press. School board already ordered sets for every elementary library." Roby traced the embossed title with her thumb. Amazing how fast a symbol travels. She glanced at the mural, visible through the frosted window. Coda's painted form now accented by holiday lights strung along the roofline. "Sometimes we chase evil so long we forget people still yearn for heroes." Ryan sipped his coffee. Heroes with mortgages and vet bills. "Speaking of," Roby grinned, dropping an envelope on the table. "City Council approved lifetime care stipend for Coda. Official now that he's public property." Coda thumped his tail, as if sensing talk of benefits. Outside, a pair of teenagers posed for a selfie in front of the mural. One held up a peace sign, the other mimed a dog's floppy ears. Further down the street, a bus stop poster displayed the new Advocacy Center's logo, a stylized paw breaking through a padlock, tagline every child heard. Corporate sponsors had begun contacting Maya Caldwell in droves. What donor didn't want to be associated with a miracle dog? But Ryan knew the symbol worked only because it was true. Coda had listened when no one else did, and the town, in hearing that story, had started listening to children, to whistleblowers, to their own uneasy questions. He scratched behind Coda's ear. "Ready for retirement now, pal?" Coda yawned, rested his head on Ryan's boot. Somewhere between yes and no. Because symbols don't retire, they evolve. Today, biscuits and murals. Tomorrow, therapy visits and depositions. Outside, daylight glanced off wet pavement, turning it gold. The mural sun seemed to glow for real, its rays brushing the shepherd's painted fur. For a heartbeat, paint and flesh blurred hope rendered in both pigment and living heartbeats. Ryan closed the book gently. "The dog who found the light," he murmured. Roby raised her cup and led the rest of us out. They clinked mugs. Across the room, Lily pressed her nose to the bakery glass, waving at Coda inside. The dog's ears perked. His tail swished once, twice enough to fog the window with promise. On the sidewalk, a passerby paused, reading the memorial plaque words he'd seen before but somehow felt new in this moment. In honor of those found and those still missing. The message and the mural and the dog who inspired both lit the gray winter morning like stained glass, casting color on anyone willing to look up. The Crestfield Civic Center had never hosted anything quite like this. Rows of folding chairs filled the small auditorium, their metal legs ringing softly as people settled in. Parents, officers in pressed dress blues, trauma counselors in soft cardigans, construction workers who had hammered the new center's first nails. Above the stage, a banner draped in navy velvet red. Silver Paw Medal for Distinguished Animal Service. Spotlights painted it gold. Backstage, Ryan knelt beside Coda, adjusting the polished black vest stitched with a single silver thread. Retired, still serving. The German Shepherd sat calmly, ears flicking each time applause rose for another local honoree, an EMT, a volunteer therapist. When announcer Grace Tomlin finished each name, she'd glance to the wings, checking time until the headline moment. Ryan smoothed his tie and exhaled. "You ready to become a public figure, buddy?" Coda sneezed, the sound half huff, half laugh, as if to say, "Wasn't I already?" A stagehand whispered, "You're on deck." Ryan stood, wiped his palms. Memories flickered. Tunnels, crayon, Lily, whispering doggy, rubble becoming garden. Tonight would be a punctuation mark, not an ending, but a pause long enough to breathe. Grace Tomlin's voice carried over the mic. "Our final honoree embodies the intersection of instinct, training, and unshakable loyalty. Please welcome Officer Ryan Mercer and the hero of Willow Creek, Coda." Lights brightened. The curtain wing opened. Ryan stepped onto the stage, Coda trotting at heel. A standing ovation met them sharp, immediate, rising like a wave. Phones lifted. Camera shutters fluttered. It should have felt overwhelming. Instead, Ryan felt the hush beneath. The collective inhale of a town acknowledging pain and possibility at once. Grace knelt to Coda's height, hands steady though her voice trembled. "Coda," she declared, "for exceptional bravery, for the discovery that saved children's lives, for reminding us that courage wears fur as often as badges. We award you the Silver Paw Medal." The medallion was a matte silver disc embossed with a laurel paw print, suspended on a deep blue ribbon. Ryan guided Coda to a sit. Grace looped the medal gently around the shepherd's neck. Flashbulbs popped. Coda blinked, then tilted his head, the metal disc catching light. Ryan approached the lectern. Notes folded in his pocket but forgotten. He gripped the sides, eyes scanning faces. Lily nestled on Stephanie's lap. Jenna in the second row, hands clasped. Clarice and Cynthia under soft security presence. Mayor Alvarez dabbed her eyes discreetly. Even seasoned detectives sat expectant, waiting for words they themselves could not quite form. Ryan cleared his throat, voice amplified yet intimate. "When I first met Coda, we were in a place where streets had no names, just coordinates on a map. He saved soldiers, civilians, strangers whose language we didn't share. I thought his work ended when we left the battlefield. I was wrong." He paused, steadying breath. "A few months ago, Coda scratched at a rug in a cheerful daycare. We all know what he uncovered. Not just a trap door, not just a tunnel, but a wound beneath our community's skin. That day, Coda didn't just find a girl," his voice caught. Audience held breath. "He found all of us. He found the part inside each of us that had stopped listening to small voices, that assumed bright paint meant safety. He reminded us that vigilance is an act of love." Tears tracked silently down Stephanie's cheek. Lily held the bronze paw pendant from the memorial, clutching it to her chest. Ryan continued, softer. "This medal is heavy, but not as heavy as the silence Coda broke. It belongs to every child who left a crayon message in the dark and believed a dog would read it. It belongs to every officer, nurse, neighbor, who decided their doubts mattered." Coda just led the way. He reached down, fingers brushing the shepherd's ruff. "People ask when he'll retire. Truth is, heroes like Coda don't retire, they ripple. In murals, in therapy rooms, in hero biscuits, in a book that helps kids speak. His job now is not to dig," Ryan smiled, "but to shine." Applause thundered, rolling through the hall like surf. Coda rose and offered a soft bark, tail sweeping once, twice. The sound pulled a laugh through tears across the crowd. Grace Tomlin placed a hand over her heart. "Thank you, Officer Mercer. Thank you, Coda. May your light guide us." Ryan stepped back, letting Coda take center stage. Children in the front row waved. The dog's ears perked, tongue lolling in a grin. A boy with noise-canceling headphones clapped silently, broad smile bright as any cheer. As Ryan guided Coda off stage, the ovation followed them into the wings, echoing in hallways where, years from now, new ceremonies might honor different heroes. But tonight, the echo belonged to a dog who listened harder than most people dared. Backstage, Ryan knelt once more. The Silver Paw Medal flashed under fluorescence. He pressed his forehead gently to Coda's. "Job, well done," he whispered. Coda nudged his shoulder, as if to say, "On to the next." And somewhere beyond the applause, Ryan felt the future open a path lit not just by badges and laws, but by one dog's unyielding belief that every hidden cry deserved to be heard. The Civic Center parking lot emptied in waves first, the reporters, then city officials, then families who lingered to hug strangers that no longer felt strange. By 10:30, the marquee lights dimmed, and the night regained its steady hush, broken only by the chirr of summer crickets. Ryan steered the Tahoe to the far end of Crestfield Commons, an open field that once hosted Little League games before budget cuts shelved the bleachers. He killed the engine, darkness folding around them like a blanket still cool from dusk. Far from street lamps, the sky unveiled itself. Indigo depth. Stars scattered like thumbtack promises. He opened the tailgate. Coda hopped down, metal glinting with each padded step. The shepherd padded to the middle of the field and circled twice before settling into grass jeweled with dew. Ryan followed, jacket slung over a shoulder, breath easing as the evening swallowed the last echoes of applause. They sat together, the man cross-legged, the dog sprawled, chest rising slow. Above them, the Milky Way stretched faint and stubborn, a river of light refusing to be drowned by distant city glow. For the first time since the tunnels, Ryan let the stillness seep in. Adrenaline finally drained, leaving a familiar emptiness, the warriors quiet after the clash, when victory tastes of iron and unfinished work. What now? The question looped, relentless. He had walked Coda across a stage, watched a town cry, accepted a medal that weighed less than the memories it signified. Yet the board in the war room still carried pins. Names still under unit counted. Shell companies still layered, like onion skin. Over truth. Ryan lay back, palms under his head, eyes tracing constellations he couldn't name. Beside him, Coda rolled onto his side, tail thumping once, then still. The medal's ribbon fluttered. Starlight kissed the silver paw. "Think we're done, partner?" Ryan whispered. Coda's ear flicked. He released a slow huff that ruffled the grass. Ryan smiled a small, tired curve. "Didn't think so." A satellite inched across the heavens steady, purposeful, a reminder that some eyes never sleep. Ryan followed its path, mind sifting through threads. The Tennessee summer camp property, the missing audit files, the blank badge with initials ER. Whose hands still tugged those hidden strings? A cool breeze swept over the field, carrying the faint scent of lilac from the advocacy garden a quarter-mile away. Ryan's thoughts drifted to Lily asleep with a stuffed shepherd, to Maya Caldwell drafting therapy schedules, to Jenna autographing the first run of the children's book. Pockets of healing sprouted like stubborn wildflowers. But the soil remained laced with roots of the past. He turned to Coda, studying the gray that crept now over the dog's muzzle like early frost. "You did your part, and then some," he murmured. "It'd be fair to let you chase rabbits and retirement biscuits." Coda blinked, unimpressed by the offer, as if to say, fair isn't the point. Ryan laughed under his breath. "All right, no rest yet." He pictured the next step's federal task force briefings, subpoenas, cross-state digs, where barns and basements waited. He pictured children whose faces weren't yet on the board because no one knew they were missing. The mission's horizon stretched farther than the constellations and just as necessary to chart. Somewhere in that hush, he realized the question wasn't, "What now?" but who else? Who else would join, would listen, would scrape at floorboards when something felt wrong? That, he decided, would be his role, to train more ears, more noses, more hearts unwilling to ignore the faintest scratch. A shooting star flared, brief and bright. Ryan found himself almost praying not for peace, but for momentum. The kind that turns a symbol into policy, outrage into reform, applause into funding streams that do not wither when headlines fade. He sat up, grass damp against his palms. Coda rose too, stretching with a grunt that sounded like an old hinge, finding new purpose. Ryan unclipped the silver paw medal, held it between thumb and forefinger. Under starlight, its surface looked less award than mirror-reflecting sky dog man. "It's not ours," he said softly. "Just on loan until the board is empty." "Oh." He slipped the medal into his jacket pocket, a promise kept close to the heart. Coda nudged his hand and began trotting toward the tree line, where the faint path back to the truck glimmered. Ryan followed, boots brushing grass, resolve settling like new armor. Before reaching the gate, he paused, glancing back at the field. Dark now, save for the faint luminescence of crushed blades and one lingering star low on the horizon. It felt like an eye, watching. He nodded to insolent pledge. Then he and the dog, who heard what hearts couldn't say, walked into the future, beneath a sky wide enough to hold every unfinished story and every light yet to be found. 2 weeks after the medal ceremony, Monday settled over Crestfield like a long, exhale-gray sky. Drizzle on the courthouse steps, paperwork stacking faster than coffee cool. Ryan sat at his desk, half listening to Coda's soft snores under the blotter, when the phone on the corner line trilled a sharp, unfamiliar cadence. Not the front desk, direct from state dispatch. He snatched the receiver. "Mercer," a woman's voice clipped, urgent. "Detective, this is Officer Peters, Louisville Metro. I was told to call you directly. We have a situation that fits the pattern you flagged." Ryan straightened, adrenaline blooming. "Talk to me." "Abandoned daycare slated for auction," Peters said. "New owner found a false wall behind the nap room. Hand, dug tunnel, children's items identical to your Crestfield scene. License history traces to Bright Horizons Learning, dissolved 2018. Holding company." She paused, papers rustling. "Argon Holt, LLC." Ryan closed his eyes. There it was, the echo he'd felt under the stars, now taking shape in daylight. "Any sign of kids?" he asked. "Not yet, but we haven't breached the interior chamber. We're freezing the scene. Our captain wants you and your canine specialist." Her tone softened, almost reverent. "The one who found Lily." Ryan's gaze dropped to Coda. The shepherd's ears perked as if the words crossed a frequency only he could hear. Ryan covered the mouthpiece. "Louisville?" he told the dog. "Same story, new ground." Coda rose, stretched, the silver paw tag glinting from his collar. He shook one steel, fur and purpose clicking back into alignment. Ryan returned to the line. "Send me coordinates and a live feed of your borescope. We'll be on the road in 15. Tell your captain to keep the crawl space untouched." "Copy." "And Detective—" Peters hesitated. "Thanks for picking up." Ryan hung up, pulse steady now, the path illuminated. He clipped on his holster, shrugged into a weathered field jacket. Papers on the desk fluttered as he scooped Coda's harness from the chair back. "Vacation's over, partner." Coda trotted to him, tail wagging a deliberate rhythm. Ryan knelt, fastening the vest straps, fingers brushing the raised stitching. Listening is a duty. Somehow the phrase felt heavier, truer, each time he read it. He rose, grabbed the evidence kit, and headed for the door. Halfway, he paused, looked back at the wall where the board once hung. It was almost empty. Now pins pulled, strings coiled, photos returned to families or archives. Only 3 cards remained, under UNEC counted. He tapped them gently, a silent vow, then flipped the light off. Outside, drizzle had thickened to sleet. Ryan opened the Tahoe's rear. Coda hopped in without command, turning once before settling. The vehicle smelled of field mud and dog biscuits, a mobile shrine to every mile of the hunt. As he slid behind the wheel, wipers sweeping, he felt the familiar electricity spark in his chest, not dread, but readiness. The same current that had pulled him through alleyways in Kandahar, through trapdoor air stale with silence, through the roar of a courtroom when verdicts finally fell. He looked in the rear view. Coda met his eyes, head tilted, waiting. "You ready for one more?" Ryan asked. Coda's tail thumped the crate wall. "Yes." A single beat, sure as a gavel. Ryan turned the ignition. Tires hissed onto wet asphalt. Headlights carving tunnels of white through the mist. The road unfurled ahead, new county lines, new hidden rooms, new small voices, etched in crayon, awaiting discovery. Behind them, Crestfield's lights dimmed in the mirror, but the beacon they carried did not. The mission was still unfinished. And somewhere down that slick, endless ribbon of highway, another secret waited for the dog who refused to stop listening and the man who finally understood that justice was not a destination but a road best traveled. Again and again, beneath the beating of one steadfast tale. Sometimes it's not the loudest voices that change the world, but the quietest bonds. A child's whisper, a dog's gaze, the soft rhythm of trust that builds between two souls who choose to believe in each other. German shepherds like Coda, remind us what loyalty really means, not just staying, but standing between us and the darkness. And in return, we offer something even greater: a home, a purpose, a place to rest their brave hearts. If you've ever looked into your dog's eyes and felt something unspoken pass between you, you already know what I mean. If you're ever curious, there's a place I came across that helps deepen that bond space, where training meets understanding, and where love becomes language. It's not a pitch, just something I found meaningful. If it feels right, you'll know when to look. Until then, hold your dog a little longer tonight. Let them know they're seen. Because sometimes, the best heroes walk on four legs and they ask for nothing more than to walk beside us.